Chapter 2335, Profitable Trading. As the gigantic Crimson Dragon flying ship appeared above Ghost City, it attracted everyone's attention like a dazzling sun. The flying, steel giant was impossible not to notice. The roar of the flying ship's engine reverberated like the roar of a dragon. One could even hear it from several thousand yards away. What's going on? Did someone trigger an event? No, that should be the rumored flying ship that appeared at sea not long ago. It's come to Ghost City? Which power owns that flying ship? Aren't they a little too strong? Heated discussions erupted across Ghost City when players noticed the Crimson Dragon flying ship. The dark players it had flown over earlier had already posted about it on the Chaos Sea's official forums, which had already caused a huge commotion. Now that the ship had appeared above Ghost City, how could the city's players ignore it? As they arrived, Shifeng didn't linger above the city for too long, piloting the flying ship toward Ghost City's airport. There were a total of 24 cities within the Chaos Sea, and they were all very far apart from each other. Normally, players had to rely on sea or air transportation to travel from one city to another. Thus, every one of the Chaos Sea cities had well-developed ports and airports. Disembarking, Shifeng stored the Crimson Dragon flying ship and entered the airport terminal. As he did, he was greeted by a large crowd of dark players and a smattering of normal players. The dark players didn't seem surprised to see normal players like Shifeng and Immortal Light's members. It wasn't unusual for players to risk the trip through the Chaos Sea for a profit. Player-owned counters filled the terminal, all selling a variety of precious items. Ghost City's airport was just as lively as the auction houses in the capital city of kingdoms. This place is bustling. Sindhart could not believe his eyes when he saw the number of players and precious items in the terminal. Is this city really controlled by the Dark Forces? From his impression of the Dark Forces, their territory should be chaotic, filled with endless slaughter. They shouldn't look anything like this prosperous city. Moreover, the items available for purchase were so valuable that even Sindhart, Immortal Light's guild leader, was tempted. These vendors sold secret silver mounts and Tier 3 summoning scrolls that were quite rare in the Apocalypse Empire. Moreover, these items were available in abundance. He even spotted one player selling over a dozen bronze speedboats, which weren't available at all in the Apocalypse Empire. The rest of Immortal Light's members were just as excited, wanting nothing more than to claim every one of these items. Only Shifeng maintained his composure when he saw the wide variety of products for sale in the airport terminal. Chaos did reign over the Dark Forces territories, but that chaos stopped at a city's borders. As the only safe havens for dark players to rest, the Dark Forces ensured safety within their NPC cities, allowing players to conduct their business. Due to how few cities there were in the Chaos Sea, it was only natural that these cities would prosper. In addition, dark players had very different values than their normal counterparts. Some items that were quite important to normal players had no value to dark players. Since the Chaos Sea's dark players used oceanic demonic creatures as their preferred mode of transportation at sea, land mounts and ships were worthless to them. Moreover, dark players prioritized their own strength over all else, so they weren't particularly interested in external tools. Those that relied on such tools would struggle to secure powerful legacies. Thus, players generally sold external tools for low prices in the Dark Forces domain. This was also why the various naval powers were interested in conducting business in the Chaos Sea. When Sindhart noticed the Primal Void Stones for sale and saw their prices, he had the urge to curse, even with as mild-tempered as he typically was. Primal Void Stones sold for as high as 5 to 10 gold per stone on the main continent. The inconvenience of transporting the stones was a large part of the reason that they sold for such a high price, but compared to the Primal Void Stones in Ghost City, the stones on the main continent were dirt cheap. These players were selling Primal Void Stones for 40 gold apiece. Moreover, these dark players fought to purchase any Primal Void Stones they could, even at such a high price. They cleaned the vendors of every stone in no time. Only the counters that demanded 60 gold per Primal Void Stone had any remaining stock. Here, Primal Void Stones were incredibly profitable. The Freedom Alliance had tasked each power to transport 300 Primal Void Stones for its test. As an incentive, the Freedom Alliance had also offered each power that completed the task half of their shipment. Even if they sold their Primal Void Stones at 50 gold each, they'd make 7,500 gold from this trip alone. If they could deliver such large shipments to Ghost City each day, they'd walk away with an astounding amount of profit. Sindhart finally understood why Shifeng had insisted on competing for the partnership rights to the Primal Void Vein, going so far as to expose the Crimson Dragon flying ship to the other major powers, becoming a target. If they could deliver Primal Void Stones to Ghost City long-term, they'd likely earn more profit than a guild city. Even a lousy Primal Void Vein should generate several thousand Primal Void Stones each day. Even if Immortal Light and Zero Wing only secured 1,000 Primal Void Stones per day and shared half of the profits with the Freedom Alliance, they'd make over 25,000 gold a day. If they sold the stones at a higher price, they could even rake in 30,000 gold per day. Even a first-rate guild would go crazy for such massive profits. Sindheart wasn't the only one surprised by the Primal Void Stones prices. The situation even shocked Shifeng. Within the Dark Forces territories, Primal Void Stone had only sold for 20 gold per stone during his previous life, yet now that price was more than double. It was no wonder why the Freedom Alliance wanted to find partners to help deliver its stock. Shifeng quickly handed off half of his shipment to the Freedom Alliance's representatives in Ghost City, putting the other half of the Primal Void Stones up for sale. By the time all 150 of his Primal Void Stones had sold, he had earned a net profit of 7,650 gold. If they secured the Freedom Alliance's partnership rights, both Zero Wing and Immortal Light would secure a long-term source of coin and Primal Void Stone income. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Once they completed the Freedom Alliance's test, Shifeng and his companions left Ghost City. They wanted to sign their partnership contract with the Freedom Alliance as soon as possible, so they used return scrolls to teleport back to Blue Jade City. From there, they flew to Starfall Island aboard the Crimson Dragon flying ship. As soon as they arrived in Starfall Town, they sensed a tense atmosphere around the town. For some reason, the various major powers representatives now stood outside of the entrance to Freedom Alliance's residence. These representatives didn't seem surprised or envious as they watched Shifeng and the others return. Rather, some of them sneered at the group while others watched with pity. Shifeng approached the residence's entrance and 5 players, a woman and 4 men, wearing Giant's Heart's Guild emblem blocked his way. The woman was the player with blue hair that Shifeng had met during the meeting, and the 4 men behind her were all level 97 players, radiating auras that were no weaker than a great lords of the same level. Unlike Sindheart, who only had the combat power of a peak expert, all 4 of the men were bona fide peak experts. "You're back. Come with me. Our boss wants to meet with you," the blue-haired woman coldly stated as she glanced at Shifeng. Chapter 2336, Giant's Invitation. When they heard the blue-haired woman's declaration, the various powers representatives glanced at Shifeng with varying expressions. Sure enough, Giant's Heart is making its move. I knew this would happen. With the Primal Void Stone's potential profits, neither the First Fleet nor Giant's Heart can let this go so easily. Zero Wing doesn't know how to take a hint. Flame Robber is clearly trying to share the Primal Void Vein with Giant's Heart, yet Zero Wing dared to interfere. All of these powers wanted the partnership rights to the Primal Void Vein as well, but they knew that they couldn't get their hands on it with a superpower like Giant's Heart already in the way. Zero Wing's determination to win the competition was no different than pulling a tiger's whiskers. The Freedom Alliance might be a powerhouse in Sea's End, but its strength was limited to the sea. However, even super guilds were wary of Giant's Heart, both on land and at sea. Now retribution had come for Zero Wing. Just as Sindheart was about to step forward, the 4 experts behind the blue-haired woman noticed, and the intensity of their auras skyrocketed. All 4 of the men stared Sindheart down. These 4 were bona fide peak experts with extraordinary legacies and equipment standards to rival Sindheart's. When their aggressive auras washed over Sindheart, he felt as if he were being watched by 4 ferocious beasts. He sensed that these 4 would pounce and kill him if he made any sudden movements. So this is Giant's Heart's strength? Suddenly, Sindheart didn't feel in control of his own life as he squirmed under the experts' gazes. He was one of the top 10 elementalists in the Apocalypse Empire, and he had defeated his fair share of peak experts. However, every one of the 4 experts before him felt like a major threat. Even if he had backup from Immortal Light, he was certain that he'd die here if all 4 attacked together. Moreover, he suspected that the blue-haired woman was the most frightening of the 5. Sindheart didn't know exactly how strong the blue-haired woman was, but it was clear that the 4 experts behind her respected her greatly. In God's domain, players that had risen to the standard of peak experts would even enjoy very high status within superpowers. The various superpowers would fight to recruit such players, and it was no exaggeration to say that a peak expert could join any superpower they wished. Because of this, peak experts tended to be quite prideful. Peak experts only truly respected more powerful experts. Giant's Heart is quite impressive to nurture such a young domain realm expert such as yourself, Shifeng flattered, smiling at the indifferent blue-haired woman. Since your guild has invited me, please, lead the way. Feng was not surprised that Giant's Heart had sought him out. The primal void stones would be a huge source of income, even to the various superpowers. He would have actually been surprised if Giant's Heart hadn't made a fuss. Astonished, Sind Heart glanced between Feng and the blue-haired woman. He hadn't been aware of a domain realm expert's true strength a few months ago, but as he grew stronger, that factor became clear. Defeating an expert of his caliber would be child's play for a domain realm expert. But as far as he knew, only old monsters were domain realm experts. This blue-haired woman appeared to be, at most, 23 years old. Even the term genius wasn't a sufficient description. Meanwhile, the blue-haired woman couldn't help but pay more attention to the man before her, surprised and confused by Feng's statement. She had only reached the domain realm 7 days ago, and very few people in her guild knew about the accomplishment. She was very careful to hide her combat standards, ensuring that even domain realm experts would dismiss her as a void realm expert at most. She had never expected Feng to recognize her for what she truly was. Are we really going to go with them, Brother Feng? Sind Heart asked worriedly in the team chat. Just standing before these 5 players put their lives at risk. If they entered Giant's Heart's territory, they'd be at the guild's mercy. Since we've received such a grand reception, why wouldn't we? Feng countered, chuckling. Feng's response rendered Sind Heart speechless. Feng wasn't wrong about this being a grand reception. A guild wouldn't even send 4 peak experts and a domain realm expert to escort the guild leaders of the Apocalypse Empire's top-ranked first-rate guilds. However, this party clearly harbored ill intentions. Let's go. Our boss doesn't have much time to waste, the blue-haired woman said, annoyed. She had wanted no part in this situation in the first place. As far as she was concerned, Giant's Heart already showed enough respect by sending 4 peak experts to escort Feng, but her superiors had given her a command and she hadn't had a choice. The blue-haired woman then turned and led Feng and Sind Heart into the Freedom Alliance's residence. The other Immortal Light members, however, were forced to wait outside. Following the young woman, Feng and his companions soon found themselves outside of the residence's top-floor reception room. Sind Heart was dumbfounded to see 8 Giant's Heart experts guarding the doors. Although these 8 experts were only level 96, they all radiated incredibly powerful auras. Sind Heart could tell that they all had stronger life ratings than the 4 peak experts that had greeted them at the residence's entrance. Only these experts hadn't reached the Void Realm yet. Even so, their combat power should only be slightly weaker than the 4 peak experts. With such a formidable foundation, Giant's Heart could annihilate Immortal Light with little effort. Go in, the blue-haired woman said as she pushed open the reception room's doors. Nodding, Feng entered the room with Sind Heart by his side. From the nearby hallway, several Freedom Alliance commanders watched this unfold. Ah! It seems Passing Monarch will be disappointed. Identical Summer, the current 5th Fleet's commander, commented, laughing. When he had seen Zero Wing's flying ship and knew it would win the partnership rights to the Primal Void Vein, he had nearly gone mad, but now that Giant's Heart had stepped in, he couldn't wait to see how Zero Wing intended to get out of this mess. At the end of the day, some things are simply impossible to obtain. If Zero Wing gives up the partnership rights, it should be able to continue working with the Freedom Alliance, 100 Leaves surmised with a sigh. Zero Wing had won the partnership rights, but the guild was still too naive. In one of the past virtual reality games, the various superpowers would have likely let the matter slide, but in God's domain, there were just too many benefits and secrets. It would not be easy for non-superpowers to claim such a valuable resource in this game. Meanwhile, a handsome, white-haired man reclined on one of the sofas in the reception room. The moment Sind Heart entered the room, he was overwhelmed by a strange, stifling sensation. Is that man a monster? Sind Heart felt cold sweat slide down his back as he looked at the white-haired man before him. The man didn't reveal any killing intent or seem dissatisfied, yet Sind Heart was terrified. His instincts screamed at him to stay away from that man and run. So, you're Zero Wing's Feng? I am Autumn, one of Giant's Heart's vice guild leaders, the White High introduced himself. He sipped from his teacup before smiling at his guests and continued, I've heard about you before. It seems you have a lot of authority in Zero Wing and have even led some of the guild's major operations. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. That's right, Feng confirmed, nodding. That makes this simple. I have come here in hopes of purchasing Zero Wing's Crimson Dragon flying ship. Are you willing to sell it? If you agree, not only will Giant's Heart help you stabilize your claim on the Primal Void Vein's benefits, but we'll also sell you some ocean boundary stones, a resource unique to the sea god's realm, White Autumn explained. Ocean boundary stone is a precious item that can help players learn combat techniques more efficiently. It can even help peak experts master the incredibly complex bronze combat techniques. When the blue-haired woman heard White Autumn's offer to sell ocean boundary stones, she was stunned. Ocean boundary stones were extremely rare in the sea god's realm, just as rare as epic equipment. Even Giant's Heart only had a small number on hand and had refused to sell its stock to outsiders. Your offer is quite attractive, Vice Guild Leader White, but Zero Wing has no intention of selling the Crimson Dragon flying ship. Shi Feng shook his head, rejecting the offer without a second thought. Chapter 2337, Ocean Boundary Stone. Silence filled the room after Shi Feng had rejected Giant's Heart's offer. Sind Heart looked particularly gloomy. He hadn't expected Shi Feng to refuse White Autumn so curtly. The blue-haired woman behind White Autumn could only stare at Shi Feng in astonishment. Shi Feng should have been ecstatic to accept White Autumn's offer. Giant's Heart was incredibly powerful, even strong enough to contend with super guilds. It ruled over all of the sea god's realm. If Zero Wing had agreed to trade with Giant's Heart, it would have earned the superpower's favor, which countless powers dreamed of. This was especially true now that God's domain had entered such a chaotic era with the planar passages opening. A flying ship was very valuable, but the various superpowers now knew of it and had begun to set their sights on Zero Wing. Holding on to the flying ship wouldn't be easy for the guild. If Zero Wing had accepted the offer, not only would it have gained Giant's Heart's favor, but it would have also secured a ton of resources to help its experts grow stronger. Not even Starlink would have casually attacked Zero Wing, much less Warblood, yet Shi Feng had rejected the offer without any hesitation. Is he unaware of our guild's strength? It was the only possibility the blue-haired woman could think of. There was no other reason that Shi Feng would refuse such an excellent opportunity. Zero Wing doesn't intend to sell it? How unfortunate, White Autumn said, sighing. Contrary to everyone's expectations, he didn't seem angry about Shi Feng's response. Rather, he maintained his composure as he continued, since that is the case, may I ask to borrow the flying ship to complete a quest? I'm willing to offer 5 ocean boundary stones as remuneration. Help with a quest? After giving the matter some thought, Shi Feng said, I don't see an issue with that. How long will the quest take to complete? Shi Feng did find the ocean boundary stones tempting. They were the 5th best tool in God's domain to improve players' efficiency with learning combat techniques. 2 ocean boundary stones had been as valuable as a piece of level 100+ epic equipment during his previous life, but even when offered such a trade, very few powers had been willing to part with their stones. White Autumn's offer of 5 ocean boundary stones was the equivalent of 2.5 pieces of level 100+ epic equipment, which was a considerably high price to rent a flying ship. With 5 ocean boundary stones, 5 of Shi Feng's peak experts could learn a bronze combat technique and acquire the combat power to face domain realm experts. Most powers lacked bronze combat techniques, but Zero Wing wasn't one of them. The guild had found quite a few bronze legacy tablets thus far and had the secret technique Lightning Flash. Shi Feng was the only guild member to grasp the technique. If Fire Dance or Gentle Snow could master it as well, they'd display extraordinary combat power with the help of their fragmented legendary items. It'll take roughly 3 days. If we can complete the quest ahead of time, I'm willing to offer an additional ocean boundary stone, White Autumn said after some mental calculations. Chuckling, he continued, even if we fail the quest, I will pay you 1 ocean boundary stone in exchange for the flying ship's rental and any damage it sustains. We have a deal, Shi Feng agreed. Ocean boundary stones were an incredibly important resource to the various super guilds, not to mention Zero Wing. May I know when this quest will begin? If Zero Wing had had enough materials to produce 2 Crimson Dragon flying ships, Shi Feng would have agreed to trade one for a large batch of ocean boundary stones, using them to nurture a large force of peak experts. We'll set off in 15 hours, White Autumn answered. Our destination is a very dangerous one. I should take this time to rest and prepare. All right. Let's sign a contract now then, Shi Feng said after a quick look through his schedule. He had some free time so he might as well use it to make some extra income. White Autumn and Shi Feng signed the contract, and now that they were bound, Giant's Heart could proceed with the quest with peace of mind. Shi Feng then left the room to sign his partnership agreement with the Freedom Alliance. Meanwhile, the blue-haired woman, who had remained silent during the meeting, finally spoke up. Vice Guild Leader, are you really planning to challenge that quest again? the blue-haired woman asked. White Autumn kept most people in the dark, but as one of the guild's domain realm experts, she knew what was happening. The man intended to challenge one of the Sea God's realm's epic main storyline quests. Giant's Heart had 3 chances to complete the quest but had already failed twice. Clearly, White Autumn hadn't given up, but if they failed again, the quest would vanish. Our chances of success will be much higher with a flying ship on our side. Moreover, we're running out of time to complete the quest, White Autumn said, chuckling. If we can complete it, Giant's Heart will have all it needs to establish itself in the Fire Dragon Empire. Even if the Pride Empire sends everything it has at us, it won't have the power to remove us from the Empire. But is it really okay to take Yi Feng with us? The blue-haired woman asked worriedly. Only 10 players can enter that place, and without a special legacy, not even a peak expert will last more than 10 seconds. If he dies, he'll be thrown out of the area without any opportunity for a healer to resurrect him. Things will become difficult once we're inside, but I'll have Blue Claw and the others share the burden. You've also reached the domain realm. With our current strength, we should be able to complete the quest, White Autumn insisted. I'll notify Blue Claw and the others then, the blue-haired woman said, nodding. Inwardly, she prayed that Shi Feng would not hold them back. Elsewhere, the various major powers and the Freedom Alliance's commanders were shocked as Shi Feng signed the contract for the Primal Void Vein partnership rights. None of them had expected Zero Wing to win the competition, and Giant's Heart hadn't tried to oppose the situation. Now that Zero Wing had the partnership rights to the Primal Void Vein, both Zero Wing and Immortal Light had secured another stable source of income. Since Immortal Light lacked sufficient naval power, Shi Feng decided to lend the guild the Storm sailboat for now. Shi Feng then made another delivery to Ghost City aboard his Crimson Dragon flying ship during his 15-hour wait. During their second visit to the city, Sindhart had emptied his pockets to purchase 7 bronze speedboats and 2 sailboats, instantly boosting Immortal Light's naval prowess. Moreover, Passing Monarch spared no effort to help Sindhart, sending one of his expert fleets to assist Immortal Light. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Now, even without the flying ship, Immortal Light could deliver Primal Void Stones to Ghost City without fearing the Chaos Sea's dark players. The guild would also deliver Zero Wing's share to its branch guild in the Apocalypse Empire. Selling Primal Void Stones to the Dark Forces was an excellent way to make a fortune, but to Shi Feng, the Primal Void Stones themselves were more valuable than the coins he could gain by selling them, especially when he had access to so many. The more he had, the valuable the stones would be. Current players just didn't know it yet. Time passed quickly while Shi Feng made these arrangements. Before he knew it, the 15 hours were nearly up. I should head to Blue Jade City now. Taking a look at the time, Shi Feng pulled a return scroll from his bag and teleported to Blue Jade City. Chapter 2338, Legacy Combat Technique sees end, Blue Jade City. After appearing in Blue Jade City's teleportation hall, Shi Feng noticed the blue-haired woman from Giant's Heart. She carried a legacy crystal ball and was in the midst of learning a combat technique. A legacy combat technique. Shi Feng was stunned to see the crystal ball in the woman's hands. God's Domain's combat techniques fell into various categories, each rarer than the last: offensive techniques, defensive techniques, footwork, and physical techniques. The rarest and most unique of these were legacy combat techniques. Legacy combat techniques were a special type, unlike ordinary combat techniques. They were limited to specific classes. Players without the appropriate class couldn't learn one even if they obtained it. Every legacy combat technique was as rare as a fragmented legendary item, and they didn't possess fixed ranks. The standard of the techniques depended on the user's mastery of them. All legacy combat techniques started out at bronze rank, and the greater a player's master was, the more power they could wield with the technique. According to rumors Shi Feng had heard, a player could acquire the strength to transcend tiers if they could fully master a legacy combat technique, even without relying on fragmented legendary or legendary items. Shi Feng had never thought that he'd run into the woman form Giant's Heart carrying a legacy combat technique around. By the looks of it, she'd already gained a certain level of mastery over the technique too. You're here. The blue-haired woman stored the legacy crystal ball in her bag when she noticed Shi Feng. Her tone serious, she continued, "Since you'll be questing with us, I should formally introduce myself. I am Linya, the Vice Commander of Giant's Heart's main force. The quest we'll be doing is unusually difficult. Even domain realm experts can lose their lives if they're not careful. I hope you won't act recklessly during the quest. We won't be able to save you. All you'll need to do is survive. Rest assured. I might not be particularly skilled in all aspects, but I'm quite good at keeping myself alive, Shifeng replied, smiling. Linya's warning made him a bit curious. Domain realm experts stood at the apex of God's domain. An averagely geared domain realm expert's performance would be even better than that of a peak expert in full top-tier equipment during a high-ranked quest. There were very few quests of the same level that could threaten an apex expert fully geared in top-tier equipment. Good. Let's go. Linya had nothing more to say after hearing Shifeng's confident response. She then led him toward the Continental Teleportation Array, and they traveled to the Fire Dragon Empire. Once they arrived, Linya pulled a teleportation stone from her bag and teleported both of them to a heavenly land of verdant mountains and clear rivers. System: you have discovered the Sea God's realm. System: as you have reached Tier 3 and are not indigenous to the Sea God's realm, the world's power works against you, weakening your physique by 30% and basic attributes by 20%. We've teleported directly to the Sea God's realm? Giant's Heart's generosity surprised Shifeng as he looked at his system map. Teleportation stones were incredibly valuable in God's domain. As long as the registered location was within range, players could use teleportation stones to transport a maximum of 5 players. Planar teleportation stones were the stronger version. Planar teleportation stones allowed players to cross dimensions and travel to a registered otherworld instantly. Although they couldn't be used in areas that prohibited teleportation, planar teleportation stones were a powerful life-saving tool. And yet, Linya had used one so casually. After their arrival, Shifeng noticed 8 other players on the mountaintop, sitting before an ancient ruin. While Autumn was one of them. Of the remaining 7, the weakest was a peak expert who was very close to reaching the domain realm. To Shifeng's surprise, not all of the 7 were members of Giant's Heart. 2 of them were independent players. Neither of the independent players had reached the domain realm yet, but they had slightly superior life ratings to Linya's. The ambient water-type mana seemed to gather around those 2 players. Sea God's direct kin? The Sea God's realm really is extraordinary. It's no wonder why Giant's Heart can contend with Pride Empire. Shifeng could not help but re-evaluate his view of the Sea God's realm upon noticing the 2 independent players. All Sea God's kin had received the Sea God's blessing. Becoming a Sea God's kin was like completing a trial of God. Of course, a hero received blessings from multiple gods. A single god's blessing wasn't enough. Even so, players who became Sea God's kin received a huge boost to their life ratings and could rival demon players in their demon forms. Those that were stronger than a god's kin were a god's direct kin. Direct kin were cherished by their patron gods, receiving some of the god's blood. Direct kin could continue to grow stronger and rival actual heroes. Shifeng had never expected to encounter independent players that had successfully become the Sea God's direct kin. Regardless of how powerful a Sea God's direct kin would be in the Sea God's realm, not even Aqua Rose would be a match for these independent players on the main continent sea. Everyone's finally arrived. But White, why are we taking an outsider with us? What will you do if we fail this quest? Silent Rain, a level 97 elementalist and one of the 2 independent players, asked. Giant's Heart's members flashed the elementalist a dark look when they heard her question, but despite their annoyance at Silent Rain's rudeness, none of them moved to teach him a lesson. That bastard. Just because he became a direct kin, he dares to disrespect our vice guild leader? Linya grumbled to herself. She wanted nothing more than to teach Silent Rain a lesson, but the Sea God's direct kin were highly favored in the Sea God's realm. Even domain realm experts who were also Sea God's kin were no match for the combat power Silent Rain commanded, even though he hadn't yet reached the domain realm. In fact, not even 4 such domain realm experts working together would be a match for the man. I believe you've heard of the flying ship that appeared while you were in the Fire Dragon Empire, White Autumn calmly stated. Yifeng owns that flying ship, which is why I've specifically invited him to help us on this quest. I have specifically invited him to help us with this quest. A flying ship? Shocked, the 7 players turned toward Shifeng. The Crimson Dragon flying ship's appearance had caused a huge commotion in the Fire Dragon Empire. Practically everyone in the Empire had heard of it by now. Aside from the convenient transportation it offered, the flying ship's combat power alone left everyone speechless. Based on what players had learned of the flying ship thus far, only mythic-ranked flying monsters would have any chance against it, and they wouldn't even have the power to destroy the Crimson Dragon flying ship. A flying ship? It seems that you're quite impressive, kid, Silent Rain said to Shifeng, a hint of envy and greed flashing in his eyes. With less than a handful of flying mounts in God's domain, a flying ship was a priceless treasure. If he had one of his own, he could walk through God's domain unhindered as long as the various superpowers didn't go all out to stop him. Alright, we don't have much time left. Let's hurry and go in. Otherwise, we'll have to wait another 2 days before we can enter. The other independent player, a level 97 berserker, quickly interrupted when he noticed the tension between his comrades. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Phew, we are running out of time, Silent Rain agreed after taking a look at the time. He then smiled at Shifeng, saying, once we're in, all you need to do is follow me, kid. I'll keep you safe. That's none of your concern, Rain. We'll handle Yifeng's protection. You just need to do your own job, a stern man in his 30s coldly stated from beside White Autumn. Blue, do you think anyone in the sea god's realm is stronger than me? Silent Rain shot back disdainfully, glancing at the stern man named Blue Claw. As Blue Claw was about to offer a harsh reply, White Autumn interjected, enough. We will proceed as planned. Let's hurry and get inside. Although White Autumn hadn't spoken loudly, every one of the 9 players felt his authority. Neither Silent Rain nor Blue Claw said anything more. The team quietly entered the ruin, one after another, and Shifeng followed Linya into the cave. Chapter 2339. Go ahead if you can. The cave was dimly lit. After everyone in the team entered it, a magic barrier appeared and sealed off its mouth. Now, players would no longer be able to enter or exit the cave unless they found the mechanism to remove the barrier. Inside this dim environment, even Tier 2 experts couldn't see more than 30 yards away, a considerably disadvantageous situation to current players. A distance of 30 yards might seem very far, but level 90+ Lord-ranked monsters could cross it in 2 seconds at most, getting within melee range. If a group of Lords suddenly charged forward, even Tier 2 experts would take damage. Our quest begins now. Everyone stay cautious. There are many diverging paths here, so stick close to each other, White Autumn commanded. Linya, you scout ahead. Blue, focus on protecting Yifeng. The monsters here are far stronger than the monsters found outside. Yifeng, you pay attention as well. Players that are not a sea god's kin will be heavily restricted here. You must not try to solo the monsters here at all. In response to White Autumn's warning, Shifeng simply replied with a silent nod. The suppression this ruin subjected players to was indeed powerful. The instant the magic barrier sealed off the cave, the inside of the cave felt as if it had transformed into a completely different world. Shifeng could also feel the suppression on him intensifying. Now, although the suppression of his basic attributes remained the same, his physique was only 60% of his original. Moreover, the sensitivity of his 5 senses had decreased sharply. It was no wonder Linya and White Autumn were constantly reminding him to be careful. Under such a powerful suppression, even Tier 2 experts would not be able to fight a Lord-ranked monster of the same level. If they came across a group of Lords, their fates would basically be sealed. Even Domain Realm experts would not fare much better in this scenario. After all, the greatest factor differentiating ordinary experts and Domain Realm experts was their control over their 5 senses. A suppression of the 5 senses would affect Domain Realm experts much more than it would affect ordinary experts. However, the ruin's suppression had minimal effect on White Autumn and the others, who were sea god's kin. On the trek into the cave, Linya, who was an assassin, was fully responsible for scouting out the path ahead. The 2 sea gods' direct kin of the team handled clearing out the monsters in the way. Although the suppression on direct kin was negligible, the monsters inside the cave were still extraordinarily powerful. Naga Siren, Bloodline Creature, Great Lord, Level 98 HP 63, 000, 000/63, 000, 000 Nagas possessing special bloodlines filled the cave. Occasionally, the Nagas would suddenly appear from a branch cave and execute a hit-and-run attack on the team or launch a long-range ambush using crossbows. Every one of these Nagas was like a well-trained, expert assassin. They also possessed combat standards reaching the Trial Tower's 5th floor. To White Autumn and the others, however, these Nagas posed very little threat. After all, every one of them possessed basic attributes rivaling those of a great lord of the same level. As for the Silent Rain and Uneducated Bull, the 2 direct kin of the team, their basic attributes were even higher. Before the dozen or so ambushing Nagas could get close to the team, they were already sent flying by a bunch of powerful attacks. We cannot waste stamina here. Accelerate our advance. White Autumn ordered as he shoved back a Naga with his shield. The Nagas inside the cave were endless. No matter how many Nagas the players killed, more would just take the place of the fallen. If they did not speed up their progress, they would eventually die from exhaustion, even if they were more powerful. At White Autumn's words, everyone immediately hastened their footsteps. For the next 3 hours or so, the team kept pushing through swarms of Nagas. However, as they moved deeper into the cave system, not only did the terrain become increasingly complex, but the number of Nagas that attacked them each time also multiplied. Initially, each group would have only a dozen or so Nagas. Eventually, that number increased to at least 20. In addition, the Nagas' coordination with each other constantly improved. Even though White Autumn and the others possessed very high combat standards, they still could not help but feel more and more pressured. Fortunately, this was not White Autumn and the others' first time visiting this place, so they were very familiar with the cave system's paths. Eventually, after fighting for another 2 hours or so, the team arrived at an extremely expansive cavern that housed a large temple. The instant everyone entered this underground cavern, a magic barrier appeared and sealed off the tunnel behind them, preventing the Nagas from chasing them any further. How close? Sure enough, it's much tougher now that we're bringing one more person, Silent Rain said. Glancing at White Autumn, he continued, White, we never agreed to bring an additional person before. You have to increase our remuneration once we get back. Rain, you'd best not go overboard. The Vice Guild leader already offered you a high remuneration. Moreover, our people were the ones responsible for protecting Yifeng. You were only responsible for opening up the path, Linya countered, frowning. She felt very dissatisfied with Silent Rain's demand. If not for this ruin being special, they wouldn't have allowed non-guild members to participate in this quest at all. Fine then. You guys tank the monsters later on. I'll stay in the rear. If that's the case, I won't have any objections. Silent Rain sneered as he pointed at the 2 golem monsters standing guard before the temple. Rock Giant, Elemental Creature, Grand Lord, Level 101 HP 375,000, 000/375, 000/000U. Linya's complexion turned ashen at Silent Rain's words. Everyone present was fully aware of how powerful level 100+ monsters were. This was especially true for the 2 rock giants before them. Through her previous experience fighting against these 2 rock giants, Linya knew that they were not monsters that current players could hope to go up against, even while in an unsuppressed state. Meanwhile, players were prohibited from using magic tools and berserk skills while inside this ruin. In such a situation, even White Autumn, who was a guardian knight, could only hold his ground against one of these rock giants for a very short period. Hence, they had to rely on Silent Rain and Uneducated Bull, who were direct kin, to tank and distract the rock giants while the others opened the temple's doors. How much do you want? White Autumn asked. From his calm reaction, he had long since expected this situation to occur. Not much. Just give the 2 of us 1 extra ocean boundary stone each. You should know that as direct kin, we burn through ocean boundary stones much more quickly than you people. Moreover, unlike independent players like us, you people from Giant's Heart are filthy rich, Silent Rain replied, smiling. However, just as White Autumn was about to agree to Silent Rain's demands, Shifeng suddenly spoke up in the team chat. Vice Guild Leader White, you'll pay 2 ocean barrier stones to whoever can tank those 2 monsters? Shifeng asked. Everyone on the team turned involuntarily to look at him in surprise. Why is this guy adding fuel to the fire? Linya's mood soured greatly when she heard Shifeng's question. Giant's Heart had expended a lot of effort just to protect Shifeng, yet he was actually helping Silent Rain stir up trouble. In this situation, White Autumn also could not help eyeing Shifeng strangely, wondering what Shifeng was up to. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. If you can safely stop these 2 monsters for 30 seconds, I'll gladly give you 2 more ocean barrier stones, White Autumn said. He did not particularly mind making this additional transaction. Instead, he was more curious about what Shifeng was planning to do. What? Kid, you want to give it a try as well? Silent Rain laughed loudly at this development. Sure. Go ahead if you can. I won't object. As long as you can tank those 2 monsters, I'll also give you the remuneration White promised me. Even a sea god's direct kin like him still had a very tough time tanking 1 rock giant. The slightest mistake would mean his life. On the other hand, Shifeng wasn't even a sea god's kin. It would be a miracle if he could tank one of the rock giants, let alone 2. If that's the case, I'll give it a try, Shifeng said before slowly approaching the 2 rock giants. The instant Shifeng got within 100 yards of the 2 rock giants, the latter's eyes suddenly released a crimson glow. Both Grand Lords then started pacing toward the swordsman, their bodies releasing a frightening pressure that made everyone tense up. Chapter 2340, Tier 3 Sword King. This guy is seriously making more problems for us. Silent Rain has to go all out just to deal with one rock giant. How can one person possibly tank two? Linya's complexion turned ugly when she saw the two rock giants charging at Shifeng. Does he need to behave this way even if he's angry? He is basically making a joke of himself in front of Silent Rain. She could understand why Silent Rain's actions would enrage Shifeng. After all, Silent Rain's demand for additional compensation because of Shifeng's presence was essentially him saying that Shifeng was dead weight. However, Shifeng's trying to prove himself by fighting two rock giants at once was simply foolish. After all, inside this ruin, everyone on the team had different tasks. Shifeng's main purpose lay beyond the rock guardians. At that point, once he took out his flying ship, Silent Rain would naturally shut up. Rain, let's get ready as well. This kid shouldn't be able to last long. If he dies, we'll have to start all over again, Uneducated Bull said, unsheathing the crystalline greatsword slung on his back when he saw the rock giants closing in on Shifeng. Although they had yet to reach the starting point of their quest, so long as players died here, they would be automatically resurrected outside the cave and lose 5% of their EXP. Then the team would have to suicide and leave the cave too. After all, Shifeng held the key to clearing the quest. Uneducated Bull did not wish to waste several more hours fighting through the cave system once more. No rush. This kid should be quite strong. Given how confident he is, he shouldn't have any problems lasting 4 or 5 seconds. It won't be too late for us to take action just when he is about to fall. That'll let him know his own worth and save us a lot of negotiation later, Silent Rain said as he shook his head and smiled. I guess you're right. Uneducated Bull nodded as he felt Silent Rain's words were reasonable. Every expert possessed trump cards. The rock giants might be very powerful, but Shifeng should not have much of a problem holding his ground against the Grand Lords for a few seconds. In contrast, if Silent Rain and Uneducated Bull took action too soon, they would only devalue themselves. While the two sea gods' direct kin were coming to an agreement, the two rock giants had arrived before Shifeng and were smashing their humongous fists down at him. The rock giants were 10 meters tall, and their fists were large enough to cover a 10-yard radius. Let alone a Tier 2 swordsman, even a Tier 2 assassin would not be able to dodge the rock giants' attacks in time. Meanwhile, even a small scratch from the attack of a level 101 Grand Lord could reap a large chunk of a Tier 2 MT's HP. Facing the attacks of two rock giants simultaneously, a Tier 2 metric tons would have to activate a life-saving skill to survive. Just when everyone assumed that Shifeng would utilize a life-saving skill to stop the two rock giants' attacks, he suddenly unsheathed the abyssal blade and killing ray, then lightly brandished his swords at the two descending fists. In the next moment, two deep, distinct cuts appeared on the rock giant's knuckles. At the same time, the attack trajectories of both fists suddenly changed. In the end, the fists landed roughly 10 yards away from Shifeng, creating large craters in the ground. Before the two rock giants could launch another round of attacks, Shifeng had already appeared behind their feet and executed a horizontal slash with killing ray. Void slash. 6 slashes carrying the power of the void landed on the hamstrings of the two rock giants, each slash inflicting over -800,000 damage on the Grand Lords. The powerful strength the slashes carried also forced the two rock giants to their knees, their offense coming to an abrupt halt. Silence. For a moment, as if time had frozen, silence filled the entire cavern. Whether it was Giants Heart's members or Silent Rain and Uneducated Bull, everyone wore a dumbfounded expression. None of them could believe this scene was true. Let alone having trouble against the two rock giants, Shifeng practically got the upper hand on the Grand Lords. He had easily blocked the fists that they found extremely difficult to dodge. His attack speed was also so fast that they caught only a blurry glimpse of his blows. However, the most frightening part of his performance would still have to be the strength he displayed. Impossible. This is definitely impossible. Silent Rain blurted out his thoughts as he watched Shifeng repelling the rock giants' attacks time after time. How can a player have so much strength? The strength of Uneducated Bull, who was a sea god's direct kin and a berserker, was unrivaled in the sea god's realm, yet even he could just barely deflect the attack of one rock giant. On the other hand, Shifeng, who wasn't even a sea god's kin, was actually suppressing the two rock giants all by himself. This feat completely shattered Silent Rain's worldview. Tier 3. White Autumn exclaimed. Although he found this unbelievable, it was also the most plausible answer he could come up with. He should be a Tier 3 Sword King. Upon hearing the words Tier 3 Sword King, unprecedented shock filled everyone's heart. Tier 2 classes were commonplace in God's domain, especially among NPCs. Only after reaching Tier 3 would one be considered a powerhouse in God's domain and receive the acknowledgement of NPCs. A Tier 3 class was one of the requirements for becoming the lord of a city. This was also the goal that players like themselves were striving toward. However, even with their current extraordinary strength, they were still not confident of completing their Tier 3 promotion quests. After all, their legacies were very special. This, in turn, meant their Tier 3 promotion quests were much more difficult than the promotion quest of ordinary players. Hence, they needed to make plenty of preparations. Nevertheless, while they were still suffering a headache over their Tier 3 promotion quests, Shifeng had actually become a Tier 3 Sword King already. Who is he? Linya's heart churned with confusion as she gazed at Shifeng. She did not believe that a small guild like Zero Wing could nurture a Tier 3 powerhouse at this stage of the game. After all, none of the various superpowers had a Tier 3 powerhouse yet. Moreover, judging by Shifeng's performance, he definitely wasn't your average Tier 3 powerhouse. When she thought back to how she had tagged along with her guild's 4 peak experts to invite Shifeng in order to show him how strong Giant's heart was, she could not help but find her actions laughable. "Rain, it seems you've bitten off more than you can chew this time," Uneducated Bull said in pity. "With his current combat power, even if both of us go at him together, we won't last more than 10 seconds against him." Experts of their caliber understood very clearly just how powerful a Tier 3 class was. The difference between Tier 2 and Tier 3 wasn't limited to basic attributes. Instead, the differences in physique and reaction speed were also massive. The degree of control a Tier 3 player could potentially exert on their bodies was far superior to that of a Tier 2 player. Meanwhile, Silent Rain's complexion also turned extremely ugly at this sight. He had never imagined that such a situation would occur. Originally, he had thought that he could use Shifeng as an excuse to earn a few more benefits from Giant's heart. However, he ended up accidentally stroking the whiskers of a tiger instead. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU Silent Rain was not afraid of Giant's heart. After all, he was practically invincible in the sea god's realm. Unless Giant's heart was willing to dispatch a large force to hunt him down, the guild could hardly do anything against him. However, that was not the case for Shifeng. Shifeng alone would be more than capable of killing him. With the help of a tracking tool, the swordsman could kill him out in the fields anytime he wanted to. "Aren't you going to open the doors yet?" Shifeng prompted White Autumn. He had been fighting for quite some time now, but White Autumn and the others still hadn't taken a single step toward the temple's doors. "Now. We'll open them now." White Autumn snapped out of his daze after hearing Shifeng's reminder. He then hurriedly had everyone else on the team move to open the temple's tightly shut doors. Due to Shifeng's presence, White Autumn and the others had no problem opening the temple doors. They did not have to worry about the rock giant's attacks at all and could focus fully on removing the door's seal. In the end, they took only 25 seconds to open the temple doors completely. After seeing White Autumn and the others enter the temple, Shifeng executed Void Slash and sent the 2 rock giants stumbling back. He then dashed straight for the temple's entrance and disappeared from the dimly lit cavern. Chapter 2341 Mutated Mythic. The moment Shifeng entered the temple, he felt as if he had arrived in an entirely different world. Instead of a ceiling, a blue sky hung overhead. Before him was a vast expanse of flowers. Just standing in this place gave him an indescribably pleasant and refreshed feeling. However, some distance ahead stood countless gravestones and statues. Each gravestone recorded the deeds of its owner when they were still among the living. A closer inspection of these gravestones would reveal that every grave belonged to someone who was once a powerhouse in God's domain. Many of these gravestones even belonged to heroes. Meanwhile, every one of these powerhouses had something in common: the fact that they all died on the same day. A resting place constructed by the sea god? Shifeng could sense faint divine might coming from the gravestones and statues before him. If these things weren't constructed by a god, then it would be impossible for them to pick up a god's aura. After all, an item needed to be in contact with a god for an extended period to absorb the god's aura. Just a graze would not be sufficient. During the time Shifeng was observing his surroundings, White Autumn and the others approached him. "Elder Yifeng, your guild really has hidden its strength deeply. If Warblood and Starlink find out about this, they'll most likely receive a fright," White Autumn said in admiration as he looked at Shifeng. Although White Autumn had long known that Shifeng possessed extraordinary strength, he never thought that Shifeng was this strong. The fact that Shifeng advanced to a Tier 3 Sword King so soon would serve as a huge deterrence to the various superpowers. After all, nobody could guarantee that, should Zero Wing get pushed into a corner, Shifeng would not invest a large amount of time specifically to make trouble and target the upper echelons and core experts of Zero Wing's enemies. Most likely, only be a few players in God's domain could say with confidence that they could survive against a Tier 3 Sword King. Moreover, Zero Wing also had a flying ship and occupied a medium fortress on Dragonheart Island. After remembering these matters, White Autumn could not help but grow interested in the guild known as Zero Wing. Now, rather than viewing Zero Wing as a pseudo-superpower, White Autumn already considered Zero Wing an existence equal to Giant's Heart. As for Linya, although she was a little in awe of Shifeng's strength, she still could not help gnashing her teeth in anger and frustration, as she felt that Shifeng had just been toying with her. Despite being a Tier 3 powerhouse, Shifeng was insistent on hiding his strength. It would have been fine if he simply kept hiding his strength, yet he chose to reveal it midway through their quest. She felt as if the swordsman had been playing her for a fool. However, as luck would have it, she was utterly helpless to do anything against him. What Linya did not know was that, if not for the extreme importance of ocean boundary stones to Zero Wing, Shifeng wouldn't have bothered interfering at all. After all, it was much easier to just relax at the rear and collect his payment of ocean boundary stones once the quest was done. However, he had received an opportunity to earn 2 ocean boundary stones with merely a little effort. With the value of 2 ocean boundary stones equivalent to 1 piece of level 100 plus epic equipment, only a fool would choose not to make such a trade. Brother Yifeng, you really concealed your strength perfectly. It is my loss this time. According to our agreement, I'll give you the 2 ocean boundary stones White Autumn promised me as well, Silent Rain said, admitting his defeat. Nobody present found Silent Rain's decision surprising. Although Silent Rain was a Sea God's direct kin and could exert the combat power of a Tier 3 class in the Sea God's realm, there were still massive differences between Tier 3s. Silent Rain might be able to cope against ordinary Tier 3 experts, but against a Tier 3 Sword King like Shifeng, who could suppress 2 level 101 Grand Lords all by himself, he would be nothing but a joke. Unless Silent Rain successfully advanced to Tier 3 as well, he wouldn't perform any better than other Tier 2 players when fighting Shifeng. However, completing the Tier 3 promotion quest was easier said than done. Even if Silent Rain could get promoted to Tier 3, that was something that would happen only in the distant future. Meanwhile, Shifeng did not say anything about this situation. Gaining 2 additional ocean barrier stones was undoubtedly a good thing for him. With this, his single trip here would earn him a total of 9 ocean barrier stones. This was definitely a huge windfall for Zero Wing. After all, compared to other powers, Zero Wing already possessed a significant advantage when it came to learning combat techniques. The Extraordinary Tower. The further one progressed into the Realms of Truth, the greater the assistance the Realms of Truth would provide. Upon reaching the Ascension Realm, even a Flowing Water Realm expert would have an excellent chance of learning bronze combat techniques. Even if their mastery wouldn't be very high, they would, at least, learn the basic principles of how bronze combat techniques improved one's combat power. Meanwhile, with the help of the Ocean Boundary Stones, Zero Wing would be able to nurture a batch of experts with mastery over bronze combat techniques. At that time, Zero Wing could further stabilize the situation of its various branch guilds. Vice Guild Leader White, may I know what we will be doing next? Shifeng asked as he looked at the sea of flowers around him. What we need to do next is very simple. We just have to get rid of the spirits created by the strange energy leaking out of the graves. The quicker we clear out all of these spirits, the higher our quest completion rate will be. During our previous 2 attempts, we spent nearly 3 days clearing out the spirits. Now that we have your help, we should be able to finish this part much more quickly, White Autumn said, smiling as he pointed at the faint, crimson mist seeping out of the graves. The spirits created by the strange energy were roughly equal in strength to the Naga sirens. However, unlike the Nagas, these spirits were limited in number. One could say that, upon entering this world, they had completed a large portion of the quest already. After eliminating the spirits, all that would be left was removing the strange energy from the graves. Once that was done, not only would White Autumn be able to become a Sea God's direct kin, but he would also obtain a Sea God's weapon, which would allow him to become the ruler of the seas. While White Autumn was speaking, the strange energy seeping from the graves condensed. A short moment later, translucent undying spirits took shape above the numerous graves. These undying spirits were all geared in excellent weapons and equipment. Their eyes gave off a black glow, and their bodies radiated an indescribably strange energy, which continuously corroded the space around them as if these spirits were trying to taint the space in their own colors. Undying Spirit, Special Energy Being, Great Lord, Level 99 HP 50, 000, 000/50, 000, 000. Although these immortal spirits looked to be only ordinary Great Lords, Shifeng could tell that their combat standards were superior to the Naga Sirens, probably reaching the 6th floor Trial Tower standard. Even Refinement Realm experts of the same level would not be a match for them with their powerful basic attributes. However, against experts like White Autumn and the others on the team, these undying spirits could hardly count as an opponent. Not to mention Shifeng was also taking part in the fight now. Due to Shifeng's participation, the task that originally required nearly 3 days to complete was done in just roughly 2 days. If not for the undying spirit's very low spawn rate, the team would have finished this part of the quest in just 1.5 days. Meanwhile, during these 2 days, almost everyone in the team had received a lot of EXP. White Autumn, Linya, Silent Rain, and Uneducated Bull had all risen to level 98. As for Shifeng, due to the monster's lower level, he did not receive that much EXP from them. As a result, he was still 23% away from reaching level 103. Aside from EXP, the undying spirits had also dropped relatively excellent equipment. Even though the drop rate wasn't particularly high, White Autumn had still ended up with over 100 pieces of level 95 secret silver equipment and several pieces of level 95 fine gold equipment. In addition, he had also obtained quite a number of precious materials. After clearing out the undying spirits, White Autumn had everyone sit down and rest in preparation for the final phase of the quest. Once everyone was rested, he took out an aqua blue pendant and chanted an incantation before the graveyard. Immediately, the strange energy remaining in the graveyard went berserk and started gathering rapidly at the center of the graveyard. After 10 seconds, a 6-meter-tall undying spirit appeared before everyone's eyes, wearing a crimson cape made out of the strange energy. At this moment, this undying spirit was looking at the players before it with an evil grin on its face. Upon seeing this undying spirit, whether it was White Autumn or Silent Rain and the others, the expression on their faces changed immediately. That's not right. Why is this boss different from the ones we fought before? Linya could not help her confusion as she stared at the undying spirit. Sunset King, Mutant, Mythic, Level 100 HP 2 700 000/2 700 000. Is this Sunset King really the same as the ones we fought before? Silent Rain's complexion darkened as he felt the aura the Sunset King radiated. Its HP is more than triple of the previous ones. Although the 2 Sunset Kings they fought before were similarly mythic monsters, they had not been strong enough to make his scalp tingle. The intensity of the current Sunset King's aura was at least twice as strong as the previous ones. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. You damn it. Why is it a mutant? White Autumn's complexion paled when he saw the Sunset King. He was very familiar with the existence of mutants, as he had come across one in the Sea God's realm before. The mutant back then was only a level 60 Grand Lord. However, its strength surpassed even that of mythic monsters of the same level. It had easily slaughtered a raid team consisting of several thousand level 70+ experts. In order to bring down that level 60+ mutant, Giant's Heart had mobilized its war weapons and sacrificed nearly 10,000 expert players. Meanwhile, the mutant before him now was a level 100 mythic monster. White Autumn didn't dare imagine what would happen to the Sea God's realm if it managed to leave this place. Run. Everyone escape quickly. White Autumn shouted. This isn't a monster we can handle. We need to escape this place immediately. Chapter 2342 Void Fragmentation. None of the team members doubted White Autumn's judgment, and Linya immediately retrieved a Tier 3 group instantaneous transfer scroll, activating it. She almost moved faster than she ever had in her entire life. A level 100 mythic monster was already a handful, even for sea gods kin like themselves. They had Shifeng's help, but that might not be enough to take one day. Needless to say, they had no hope of surviving against a mythic-ranked mutant. The last time a mutant had appeared in the Sea God's realm, it had badly shaken the entire world. For that battle, Giant's Heart had unified the forces across the Sea God's realm, losing over 10,000 lives and blowing through nearly half of its resources. The guild had even been forced to rely on certain cards it had prepared to use against super guilds to bring down the mutant. To make matters worse, a mutant didn't just kill players as normal monsters did. it would sometimes devour them as well. Players that were simply killed didn't have much of an issue, but those that were captured and eaten would suffer triple the usual death penalty, and their souls would be weakened for 10 days after their resurrection. Being eaten was far more severe a loss than dying 5 or 6 times. During the battle against the mutant, many of Giant's Heart's refinement realm experts and stronger had been devoured. Unfortunately, that included some peak experts. It had been a huge setback for the guild. If not for that battle, Pride Empire wouldn't have defended against Giant's Hearse invasion in the Fire Dragon Empire so effectively. Meanwhile, not only was the mutant before them a mythic ranked monster, but it was also level 100. If they couldn't escape in time and the monster devoured them, the consequences would be unimaginably dire for experts of their caliber. Fortunately, players could use teleportation tools within this divine temple. Otherwise they'd have no hope. As soon as Linya activated the scroll, a teleportation array appeared under the team members' feet. As a Tier 3 group instantaneous teleportation scroll, it could instantly teleport up to 20 players to the nearest NPC city or a fixed location. She didn't waste a second deciding on the teleport location, setting the scroll to transport them to the nearest NPC city. Shifeng didn't object to White Autumn's decision to retreat in the least. Even with his long years of experience in God's domain, this was the first time Shifeng had encountered or heard of a mythic-ranked mutant. By becoming a mutant, a monster would be akin to a fearsome beast released from its cage. Its basic attributes would undergo a qualitative transformation, and its intellect would substantially increase. At this point, Shifeng couldn't even fathom how powerful the mutated Sunset King had become. He was certain that if he chose to stay, he'd lose his life. Mythic-ranked mutant. By becoming a mutant, a monster would be akin to a fearsome beast released from its cage. Its basic attributes would undergo a qualitative transformation, and its intellect would substantially increase. At this point, Shifeng couldn't even fathom how powerful the mutated Sunset King had become. He was certain that if he chose to stay, he'd lose his life. We're finally safe. Linya breathed a sigh of relief when she saw the countless players wandering the street around them. The rest of the team members nodded in agreement. Had they lingered in that temple for a few more seconds, the mutated Sunset King would have slaughtered them. Now that they were in Lake Mountain City, they were safe. Lake Mountain City wasn't a capital city, but it was a major NPC city that was extremely far away from the ruin they had been exploring. Even if the Sunset King wanted to target them, it shouldn't be able to do so. Only White Autumn was disappointed with the outcome. He had gone to great lengths to complete that quest, and just when he had been a step away from his promotion to direct kin and the Sea God's weapon, his efforts were wasted. It seems I troubled you for nothing, Elder Yifeng. I hadn't expected these results. However, I will still pay for your time with 3 ocean barrier stones. I hope that you can accept them, White Autumn apologized. Although he had failed the quest, White Autumn saw the merit in befriending Shifeng after the swordsman's display in the cavern. It wasn't certain that Giant's Heart wouldn't encounter another quest that would require such an expert's assistance in the future. After all, Shifeng had completed his Tier 3 promotion quest far sooner than anyone in God's domain. Even if Giant's Heart's experts reached Tier 3 as well, Shifeng's strength shouldn't be underestimated with the massive lead he had. Silent Rain and Uneducated Bull watched Shifeng enviously. According to their agreement with White Autumn, they'd only get paid if they helped complete the quest. Since they hadn't, they'd receive nothing, yet Shifeng had still been given 3 ocean barrier stones. The original agreement they had with Giant's Heart had only involved a single ocean barrier stone as payment. As Shifeng was about to respond to White Autumn's offer, however, an intense shockwave blew through the street, attracting everyone's attention. Some distance away from Shifeng's group, a tear in space opened, and 2 pitch-black hands reached out, slowly prying the tear apart. How is this possible? Linya exclaimed as she watched the black hands emerge. Those hands belonged to none other than the Sunset King. The crimson aura radiating off the crimson hands was the same strange energy that filled the Sea God's ruin they had been in. The others on the team stared at the rift as well, just as shocked. This was a monster that could track their teleportation and rip through space to hunt them down. It was the first time they had ever heard of such a creature in God's domain. Before Shifeng and the others could react, the Sunset King stepped through the enlarged spatial tear, its crimson gaze immediately locking onto the group. When it saw Shifeng and his companions, it gave them a sinister grin as if ridiculing Shifeng and the others for thinking they had any hope of escaping it. Void Fragmentation. A mythic-ranked mutant is actually this powerful? Shifeng was utterly astonished. Normally, not even Tier 4 NPCs could track players when they fled by teleporting, yet this mutated Sunset King was exactly that powerful, forcing open a path that led directly to its prey. To accomplish such a feat, the Sunset King would need to have the strength to fragment space itself. Normally, only Tier 5 or Tier 6 NPCs would have such power. Contrary to Shifeng and his companions' reactions, the players around them seemed excited as they watched the Sunset King emerge. Crap. A mythic monster is sieging the city? This is perfect timing. A level 100 mythic monster. If it dies, it'll definitely drop something excellent. If I can snatch 1 or 2 items, I'll be rich. Lake Mountain City's players didn't panic in the least when they saw the Sunset King. Rather, they hungered for its blood. They were in an NPC city after all, and the city's NPC soldiers were all level 150 or higher. A measly level 100 mythic monster would just be asking for a beating by trying to attack the city. It wasn't long after the Sunset King's appearance that a group of level 150 plus NPC soldiers arrived and charged toward it. As the soldiers approached, however, the Sunset King removed a strange crimson scythe from its back. It then brandished the weapon. Crimson blades flew from the scythe, surrounding the Sunset King. The instant these crimson blades slammed into the NPC soldiers, the NPCs flew through the air, heavily injured. Even the buildings lining the street, which were protected by magic arrays, turned into rubble as the attacks sliced through them. Every player within 100 yards of the mutated Sunset King died without even leaving behind their ashes. It was as if they had evaporated instantly. Finally, the city's players realized how afraid they should be of the Sunset King. Are you kidding me? Magic arrays had protected those buildings. Even mythic monsters would need a lot of time to destroy them, yet this monster. The players that had assumed they could take advantage of the Sunset King's arrival were dumbfounded. With a single skill, the mutated mythic monster had heavily injured several dozen level 150 plus, Tier 2 NPCs and flattened the street's buildings. This was the first time any of them had seen such power. White Autumn and his team could only gasp as they watched. How was this a mythic monster? The Sunset King was practically a natural disaster. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. After repelling the NPC soldiers, the Sunset King returned its attention to Shifeng's group. It walked toward them, and every step it took increased the pressure they felt. For a moment, they all felt as if they were standing before the Grim Reaper himself. Although the process had seemed drawn out, the Sunset King had crossed the distance between it and Shifeng's group in an instant. In fact, Shifeng hadn't even had time to react to the monster's approach. Suddenly, however, a blue-haired man in silver armor and wielding an icy blue two-handed axe appeared, interrupting the Sunset King when it was still 50 yards from Shifeng and about to swing its scythe again. The instant this middle-aged, blue-haired man appeared, the nearby players breathed a sigh of relief. This man was none other than Lake Mountain City's magistrate, Westland, a level 180 Tier 4 Heavenly Knight. Chapter 2343, Inferior Legendary Event. Even White Autumn and his guildmates released a relieved sigh when they spotted Westland. Westland was a level 180 Tier 4 Heavenly Knight. Even if the Sunset King were immune to level suppression, Westland wouldn't be thrown as easily as the level 150 plus, Tier 2 NPC soldiers. Furthermore, Lake Mountain City's magic array strengthened Westland in battle. However, the Sunset King remained unperturbed. It released even more intense energy from its scythe, energy so powerful that space around it began to crumble. At the same time, the power of the Sunset King's aura skyrocketed. What's going on? How has it become even stronger? Silent Rain stared at the crimson energy around the mutant's weapon in astonishment. The Sunset King had already displayed unbelievable power, yet it continued to grow stronger. It almost seemed like some seal had been removed. As the aura washed over him, Silent Rain even struggled to move. How is it growing so quickly? The situation confused Shifeng as well. As monsters completed a mutation, they would experience a qualitative leap to their strength, which would grow until it couldn't be quantified by levels. As mutants killed other creatures, they would continue to grow stronger, but Shifeng had never heard of a mutant that could power up twice in such a short time. The Sunset King swung its scythe again before White Autumn or his comrades could react. As a result, the space before them turned a deep crimson. Is this really a mythic monster? The distant spectators were utterly dumbfounded. With just a swing of its scythe, the Sunset King had saturated the space before it with crimson energy, which vaporized everything in its path, distorting space itself. As the crimson energy extended toward Westland, The Heavenly Knight raised his icy blue axe and yanked it down in a deadly arc Tier 4 skill, Heavenly Flash. Several dozen arcs of blue light flew toward the approaching crimson energy. As the attacks collided, they created a fierce shockwave that forced White Autumn and his team to stumble back. With it came a loud boom that echoed throughout the city. As the dust settled, it revealed that the Sunset King had only stumbled a few steps backward. Even after taking Westland's attack, the Sunset King maintained its calm gaze as it stared down the Tier 4 NPC. The mythic mutant hadn't sustained a single injury. Impossible. Is that really a monster? Even a level 180 Tier 4 NPC was only able to shove it back a little. The spectating players gaped in shock. They couldn't rationalize how a level 100 mythic monster had the strength to rival a level 180 Tier 4 NPC. While the nearby players were dazed, the Sunset King raised its scythe and bellowed. A bloody mist then manifested, spreading out around it. Easily tens of thousands of level 100+ undying spirits began to emerge from the mist. Even the weakest summoned undying spirit was a High Lord, while the strongest were Grand Lords. As these undying spirits appeared, Lake Mountain City's players heard the sound of a system notification. System: Lake Mountain City has triggered the Inferior legendary event, Awakening of the Mutant King. Kill the Sunset King before it destroys Lake Mountain City and obtain the Mutated Heart. With the Mutated Heart, one may receive the Sea God's blessing. The notification shocked everyone, and the players who had been trying to flee froze in place. An Inferior legendary event. They had never heard of such a thing happening in the Sea God's realm before. Moreover, if they killed the Sunset King, they could receive the Sea God's blessing. A God's blessing. That was even better than becoming a God's kin. If they could obtain the Sea God's blessing, an instant rise to fame would be easy. The way these players looked at the Sunset King immediately changed. Rather than fear and trepidation, they now stared at the mythic mutant with longing, fervent gazes. Attack. Our adventurer team must obtain that Mutated Heart. With it, we'll become famous throughout the Sea God's realm. Gather all of our war weapons immediately. We need to kill the Sunset King before other guilds arrive. Lake Mountain City's various major powers exploded into action. These major powers hadn't paid much attention to the Sunset King at first. A mythic monster's loot wasn't all that impressive after all. Even if they killed it, they'd be lucky to claim a handful of items with how many players were in the area. Furthermore, the Sunset King was clearly quite powerful. The potential gains simply hadn't been worth the losses. However, the system announcement had changed everything. As long as they killed the Sunset King and obtained its Mutated Heart, they could grant one player the Sea God's blessing. With it, one would be unmatched at sea. We should gather our men as well, Vice Guild Leader. With a Tier 4 NPC and an entire city of players to help raid the Sunset King, not even this mythic mutant will last long, Linya quickly advised. Before the planar passages had opened, no one would have dared to defy Giant's Heart in the Sea God's realm, but now many of the otherworld's major powers had allied with those on the main continent. Although Giant's Heart still held a significant portion of the Sea God's realm's resources, the various major powers didn't fear the guild as they once did. Hence, it was impossible to claim all of the Sunset King's loot. Notify our subordinates and tell them to send as many guild members to the city as they can. Inform them that we'll need all of our available war weapons as well, White Autumn commanded, understanding the situation's importance as well. Giant's Heart might have a powerful hold on the Sea God's realm, but that did not mean its strength was equally distributed across the world. Logically, it shouldn't have much more manpower than the local guilds in a backwater area like Lake Mountain City. Moreover, that strange, bloody mist had disabled all teleportation abilities. In other words, players would have to run to Lake Mountain City. This gave Giant's Heart even less of an advantage over the local powers. Meanwhile, Silent Rain and Uneducated Bull also began to grow anxious. Due to the Sunset King's power, players couldn't approach it. If they tried, they'd be instantly vaporized. Hence, the city's players would have to rely on tools and war weapons to raid the mythic mutant, which was a major disadvantage to independent players like them. Following which, Lake Mountain City's various major powers mobilized one trump card after another, with some using summoning scrolls, and others revealing formidable war weapons such as gnome cannons. These powers started to push back the undying army while bombarding the Sunset King. For a while, Lake Mountain City had transformed into a chaotic war zone. However, the Sunset King was no easy opponent. Not only was its attack range massive, but its summoned undying spirits also moved like a well-organized army. They specifically targeted the gnome cannons and large ballistas, forcing the various major powers to defend their war weapons desperately. Unfortunately, against the level 100+ Undying Spirits, ordinary Tier 2 experts were little more than moving targets. After only 20 minutes, over 100,000 players had died in Lake Mountain City. Several hundred Tier 2 NPC soldiers had also fallen amidst the chaos. In contrast, as the bloody mist continued to expand, more Undying Spirits joined the battlefield. Even though more players and powers joined the fight with each passing minute, they couldn't stop the spread of the bloody mist. Fortunately, bombarded by the various major powers' war weapons and magic scrolls, the Sunset King rapidly lost HP. At this rate, Vice Guild Leader, I'm afraid that the raid will end before our reinforcements arrive. Also, there are too many spirits here now. Approaching the boss's location will be very difficult, Linya worriedly reported as she watched the mythic monster's HP decrease. Even in Lake Mountain City, Giant's Heart had a considerable amount of manpower, but it didn't have as many war weapons and tools as the local powers. If their reinforcements didn't get to the battle soon, Giant's Heart's members wouldn't be able to reach the Sunset King's loot until after the other powers. White Autumn was just as anxious about the situation, but he didn't have a solution. Without being able to teleport, mobilizing their war weapons and tools would take a very long time. Vice Guild Leader White, I have a suggestion that may help us secure the Sunset King's kill, Shifeng suddenly offered. In exchange, however, I want everything the mutant drops aside from the mutated heart. Are you interested? You have a plan? White Autumn asked. The rest of the team turned to stare at Shifeng, confused. Linya was particularly confuddled, with no idea how Shifeng intended to kill the Sunset King and claim its mutated heart. The Sunset King was surrounded by a swarm of Undying Spirits, and the Grand Lord ranked Undying Spirits could even fly. Even with a flying ship, getting close to the mythic mutant would be impossible without being attacked. They would need a large number of war weapons to protect the flying ship. A flying ship wasn't particularly useful against monsters to begin with. Its offensive abilities were mainly a deterrence for other players. The vessel would be a sitting duck against a group of monsters. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. You of course, Shifeng said, nodding confidently. Deal. If you can get me the mutated heart, I'll give you the rest. White Autumn agreed. He wasn't particularly interested in the Sunset King's other items anyway. If Shifeng was confident of killing the Sunset King, it was only good news for him. May I know what the plan is, Elder Yifeng? Do everything you can to protect my flying ship, and I'll need 8 experts to man the ship's cannons. You can leave the rest to me, Shifeng said. After hearing the plan, Linya couldn't help but roll her eyes. If they had enough war weapons to keep the Undying Spirits off of the Crimson Dragon flying ship, then they wouldn't have to worry about missing out on the Sunset King's loot in the first place. Oh, I'll also need 6 peak experts to pilot these guardian puppets and protect the flying ship, Shifeng said, chuckling. He then revealed 6 guardian puppets from his epic spatial bag. Chapter 2344, Flying Ship vs. Sunset King. White Autumn and the others were stunned when they saw the 6 guardian puppets. 6 combat puppets. Did he bring Zero Wing's entire armory with him? Linya stared, astonished, at Shifeng after witnessing the 6 guardian puppets, which were as tall as buildings. Combat puppets weren't as rare as they once had been, and many superpowers had a few of their own at this stage of the game. Giant's Heart was no exception. However, due to how few the guild had, every one of them was treated as a part of the guild's foundation and mustn't be used casually. Even White Autumn, one of Giant's Heart's vice guild leaders, had to gain the guild leader's permission before he could mobilize a guardian puppet. And yet, Shifeng had pulled 6 of them from his bag as if they were common tools. The unexpected development rendered White Autumn speechless. White Autumn had already been shocked that Shifeng was allowed to carry a flying ship on him, yet now he found out that the swordsman also had 6 combat puppets. If he hadn't taken the initiative to invite Shifeng to assist on his quest and bring the man to the sea god's realm, he would have suspected that Shifeng had actually come to declare war on the otherworld. Bronze-ranked combat puppets possessed peak Tier 3 power, and under an expert player's control, they could easily surpass the combat power of Tier 3 summoned creatures and war weapons. This was why the various superpowers were so careful with their combat puppets. Destroying a guild town would be child's play if one mobilized 6 bronze combat puppets at once. Combined with a flying ship, even destroying a guild city might be possible. We don't have much time left. Let's hurry, Shifeng said, watching the spreading mist and increasing number of Undying Spirits. He hadn't planned to reveal the guardian puppets, initially. They were a part of Zero Wing's foundation after all, and they would lose durability in combat. Moreover, the materials needed to repair them weren't easy to produce. However, this was an extraordinary situation, and the Sunset King was a mythic-ranked mutant. This was the first time he had ever even heard of such a monster. The last mutant he had killed in White River City had only been a High Lord, yet its loot had been priceless, especially the Blade Saint legacy. At mythic rank, the Sunset King's loot would be just as astonishing. Its total value might even rival that of the Sea God's blessing. However, the Sunset King wouldn't be easy to kill. Aside from the increasing number of undying spirits, the mutant itself wasn't a being current players could afford to provoke. If the city's level 180 Tier 4 magistrate weren't taking it, the Sunset King would have already transformed the city into ruins. After factoring in the swarm of undying spirits, it would be impossible to get the Crimson Dragon flying ship close to the Sunset King. Hence, Shifeng had to rely on the Guardian Puppet's strength. Blue, your group will pilot these Guardian Puppets and protect the flying ship with me. Linya, your group will help Elder Yifeng control the flying ship, White Autumn said. He knew that time was of the essence right now. Everyone else, use everything you've got to help from the side. I will ensure that you're all rewarded appropriately as long as we succeed. Following which, White Autumn and 5 peak experts entered the Guardian Puppets' cockpits. Meanwhile, Linya's group boarded the Crimson Dragon flying ship with Shifeng. Naturally, Lake Mountain City's players soon noticed the flying ship and combat puppets. The steel giants were difficult to ignore. The constructs dwarfed both the players and the undying spirits. The level 100+ undying spirits, which current players had no hope against, were like children before the Guardian Puppets. White Autumn and Giant's Heart's peak experts perfectly displayed the colossal construct's strength, sending groups of undying spirits flying with a single slap. Effortlessly, the 6 Guardian Puppets opened a path through the swarm of undying spirits, preventing the summoned monsters from getting between the Crimson Dragon flying ship and the Sunset King. A flying ship? Crap. How is this fair? When the various major powers and adventurer teams saw the Guardian Puppets and Crimson Dragon flying ship, they felt as if they were using guns and swords in this battle, while Zero Wing and Giant's Heart used fighter jets and tanks. The two sides' firepower was on entirely different levels. White Autumn and the other Guardian Puppet pilots couldn't help but agree with that thought. When fighting alone, the Guardian Puppet didn't seem particularly powerful, but when 6 fought together, they made up for each other's weaknesses, doubling their combat power. Now, they were even confident of taking down a level 100 mythic monster, much less a few level 100 Grandlords. Before the watching players could overcome their shock from seeing the Guardian Puppets, the Crimson Dragon flying ship's main cannons began to gather mana. Everyone within 2,000 yards of the flying ship felt the mana density around them sharply decrease. The instant Westland used a Tier 4 skill to push the Sunset King back, the magic elven cannon fired a beam of divine light at the mythic mutant. The Sunset King had extraordinary movement speed and reaction speed. Normally, even ballistas and gnome cannons would struggle to land a hit. However, less than 300 yards separated the Sunset King and the Crimson Dragon flying ship, and even if the mythic mutant tried, it couldn't dodge the attacks in time. Thus, the Sunset King was forced to block the attack with its scythe. Boom. The instant the beam attack smashed into the scythe, space around the impact ruptured. The Sunset King simply didn't have enough strength to resist the magic elven cannons, and as a result, the beam of divine light devoured the mythic mutant power. The Sunset King rapidly lost HP while bathed in the divine light. By the time the attack ended, the Sunset King, whom the magistrate hadn't been able to injure, was visibly hurt. Cracks spread across the mutant's body, and it had lost over 20 million HP. While the Sunset King slowly healed its injuries, it would command far less combat power. A flying ship possesses such destructive power? Linya stared at the injured Sunset King with wide eyes. Not even a Tier 4 Heavenly Knight had been able to damage the Sunset King's body, yet the Crimson Dragon had achieved the feat with a single attack. It was simply unbelievable. What Linya didn't know was that the Crimson Dragon flying ship was powered by a bronze engine. Its overall DPS might not be a match for an actual bronze flying ship, but its main cannon had peak Tier 4 power. Not even Westland could afford to take a direct hit from the magic elven cannon. The boss is coming. Activate the magic shield and mana field. All mana pulse cannons attack with everything you've got. Shifeng commanded as the Sunset King turned his glare toward the Crimson Dragon flying ship. The mythic mutant made its move as soon as Feng finished giving orders. The Sunset King appeared before the flying ship in the blink of an eye and swung its scythe, sending a crimson arc slicing at the vessel. Fortunately, the flying ship's magic shield and mana field snapped up before the Sunset King had attacked. As a result, the flying ship avoided taking any hull damage. However, the attack had depleted the magic shield's energy reserve by over 6 million points. After blocking the Sunset King's attack, the flying ship's mana pulse cannons activated, one after another, firing a black and white beam that struck the mythic mutant. Each one of the beams shaved off a sizable chunk of the Sunset King's HP, and the spectating players were stunned by the horrific, spectacular explosions that ensued. After witnessing the Crimson Dragon flying ship's performance, everyone gained a newfound appreciation for flying ships. None of them had ever thought that a flying ship could go toe-to-toe with a monster as powerful as the Sunset King. With Westland pinning down the mutant and the Crimson Dragon flying ship's firepower devouring its HP, the Sunset King was rendered powerless. It could only watch as it continued to lose HP. Moreover, due to the 6 guardian puppets, the tens of thousands of Undying couldn't even reach the flying ship. 60%, 30%, 10%. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. As the Sunset King's HP continued to plummet, the mythic mutant frenzied. In turn, the Crimson Dragon flying ship steadily lost durability. They were lucky that Westland had shown up. Without him to tank the mythic mutant, the Crimson Dragon flying ship would have lost durability at a much faster rate. When the Sunset King's HP fell to 5%, it turned and fled, but Westland refused to allow it. The magistrate immediately activated Lake Mountain City's defensive magic array, sealing off the city. The Sunset King couldn't escape the city until it destroyed the magic barrier. Die. When Feng saw how little HP the mythic mutant had left, he activated the magic elven cannon once more. Although the Sunset King tried desperately to defend itself, the beam of divine light cut through its HP until it eventually hit 0. The mutant's body then disappeared, returning to the void. Chapter 2345, Holy Chant. As the Sunset King's body vanished into the void, a bright glow enveloped Feng and his companions. He reached level 103 and was more than halfway to the next level. Linya and the others manning the flying ship's mana pulse cannons instantly leveled from 98 to 100. The Sunset King had awarded many times more EXP than ordinary level 100 mythic monsters. It left Linya and the others dazed for a moment. Meanwhile, the bloody mist that had saturated Lake Mountain City began to gather toward the disappearing Sunset King. After 3 seconds, a resplendent, crimson gem formed within the mist, attracting everyone's attention instantly. The Mutated Heart. Even without inspecting the gem, everyone knew it was the Mutated Heart. After all, the crystal contained tremendous energy, even more than 7 luminaries crystals. While it hovered in the air, the crimson gem radiated such powerful waves of energy that space around it distorted as if it couldn't endure the energy. The energy within the crimson gem had no place on this plane of existence. Suddenly, a ray of holy light descended from the sky, and every player in the city heard a divine chant. As if the heavens were celebrating the Sunset King's death, over 100 globes of light fell from the sky, landing around the Mutated Heart. Their brilliant light illuminated all of Lake Mountain City. Every one of these treasures radiated incredible auras, and so close together their auras amplified each other. Bathing in the combined auras and warm light, ordinary players struggled to approach the items. Loot? After a few seconds, someone broke the silence. As if the word had been the spark to ignite a powder keg, every player surged toward the glowing orbs like a crowd of lunatics. The city's players seemed to have forgotten about Giant's Heart's members, the Guardian Puppets, and the Crimson Dragon flying ship. All of you charge. Those treasures are ours. Kill whoever tries to get in your way. I'll ensure that whoever claims an item is promoted by 1 rank within the guild. I'll even award bonus GCPs depending on the item's rarity. Lake Mountain City's various major powers promptly ordered their guild members to surround the Sunset King's loot. Although there were quite a few Giant's Heart members nearby, no one paid them any mind. With so much precious treasure before them, all else was secondary. Improving one's strength was the key to success in God's domain. Even if the superpower demanded that they hand over the treasures they had claimed later, how would Giant's Heart's players know what treasures they had taken? The guild would be quite impressive if it even knew how many items had dropped. All these powers would have to do is hand over some of the less valuable items, and Giant's heart wouldn't be able to do anything about it. While the various major powers made their move, they bombarded the area with attacks to prevent others from getting to the loot first. These people have lost their minds. Linya was furious as she watched the various major powers members swarm the loot area like locusts. She had never thought they'd be so desperate or shameless. Some major powers even began to attack the area with their war weapons. Even with a flying ship, it would take some time to clear out these pests, and by the time the loot area was clear, the surrounding players would have taken what they wanted. They were talking about several 100,000 players. Even if Giant's Heart had 6 guardian puppets and several thousand members present, it couldn't stop all of these players. I'll loot the items. You just need to keep players out of the area, Shifeng calmly told Linya. Honestly though, he was just trying to suppress the elation and shock in his heart. A holy chant. If the super guilds from his previous life had known about this, they would have done everything in their power to secure these items. He wouldn't even be surprised if they flattened Lake Mountain City for the sake of the Sunset King's loot. By now, every player in God's domain was familiar with the appearance of loot, but most didn't know that there were different ranks of this phenomenon. The most common was the glow that enveloped dropped items. After that was a dragon's roar that heralded the item's arrival, and then there was the holy chant. The strongest phenomena he had experienced in the past had been the dragon's roar. He had only ever heard of the holy chant announcing the loot's arrival. A holy chant normally only preceded loot from Tier 5 superior demon kings, Tier 5 saints and Tier 5 adult dragons. These bosses had already taken half a step into the realm of gods. Every one of these bosses ruled an area in God's domain. Ordinary superpowers had no chance of contending with such powerful existences. Usually, several superpowers would have to work together to take one down. Hence, Shifeng had been taken aback when he heard the holy chant as the Sunset King's loot had dropped. He had expected a mythic mutant's loot to be extraordinary, but he hadn't thought it would be this incredible. If the various superpowers of his previous life had known about this, they would have nurtured every mutant they could find to mythic rank before slaughtering them. When Linya watched Shifeng vault from the pilot's seat, she was at a loss. Hundreds of cannons and ballistas continued to bombard the loot area. Not even a guardian puppet would last long against so many war weapons. How exactly did that swordsman intend to get to the items in such a situation? Even if Shifeng had invulnerability skills, the dropped items were scattered across a vast area. He wouldn't be able to accomplish anything significant with how short invulnerability skills' durations were. On the off chance that he miscalculated his timing or spent too much time gathering the loot, he'd lose his life and the items he'd collected. However, before she could try to dissuade the man, Shifeng had already jumped from the Crimson Dragon flying ship directly into the loot area. Crazy bastard. The sight stupefied Linya. Everyone else had noticed Shifeng jump from the flying ship as well. Is that guy stupid? He's trying to collect the loot in such a situation? He should have an invulnerability skill. Damn it. Why don't I have one as well? I could have gone down there and stolen a dozen items myself. The crowd watched Shifeng in envy and admiration. With a dozen of the 100 or so items on the ground, one could make a killing. So many major powers were trying to get to those items right now, and each would be fortunate enough to obtain 5 or 6 items at most. However, Shifeng hadn't activated an invulnerability skill when he hit the ground as everyone had expected. Rather, he replaced the Abyssal Blade with the Twilight Blade and summoned 8 doppelgangers, each with 85% of Shifeng's basic attributes. What is he trying to do? White Autumn, who commanded Giant's Heart's members some distance away, was confused as he watched the swordsman. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Some doppelgangers could use their players' skills and spells, but none of the doppelgangers in God's domain could pick up items. Only the player's main body could do so. So, what was the point in summoning a bunch of doppelgangers in this situation? When they saw what happened next, however, everyone's eyes nearly fell from their sockets. As soon as the 8 doppelgangers appeared, they charged toward the hundreds of approaching cannonballs and ballista arrows. The 8 clones easily blocked the incoming projectiles, which were powerful enough to damage Grand Lord-ranked monsters. Meanwhile, Shifeng strolled through the area as if it were his backyard, casually collecting the scattered loot. 1 item. 3 items. 9 items. Chapter 2346. Oppressing all sides. As Shifeng started collecting one dropped item after another, silence fell over the entire city. How is something like this even possible? Crap. Is he even human? Everyone felt their worldview crumble as they watched. At this stage of the game, practically everyone had a healthy fear of war weapons. They could kill players in one hit after all. War weapons could also cause significant damage to high-ranked monsters. Without invulnerability skills, players had no way to stand up against war weapons. Relying on his own strength, Shifeng successfully blocked every incoming cannonball and ballista arrow. Even his doppelgangers effortlessly deflected the hundreds of war weapon attacks. He was simply inhuman. The various major powers members watched as Shifeng steadily collected the loot with bloodshot eyes. Every one of the Sunset King's items radiated an incredibly powerful aura. In God's domain, such auras were proof of an item's rarity and value. Even from so far away, they could see the epic glow effect shining among the Sunset King's loot, and a few items radiated a strange light and a faint trace of divine might. Kill him. Those items are mine. Use Tier 4 magic scrolls. I refuse to believe he can stop those. The various major powers' upper echelons nearly spat blood as they watched Shifeng storing the Sunset King's loot in his bag. Had Shifeng used an invulnerability skill to stop their attacks, they would have accepted their fate, but he blocked their attacks with his doppelgangers. With doppelganger skills' average duration, Shifeng would have more than enough time to collect all of the loot before his doppelgangers disappeared. If that happened, none of them would get anything from this inferior legendary event. A few of the major powers experts immediately retrieved the Tier 4 magic scrolls they had been saving and activated them against the swordsman. Tier 4 spell Heavenly Thunder. Tier 4 spell Dark Domain of Arrows. Tier 4 Hurricane Howl. Have these people gone insane? They're actually using Tier 4 magic scrolls against him. Linya felt her scalp tingle as she watched the 3 Tier 4 spells approach Shifeng. At this stage of the game, Tier 4 magic scrolls were considered a part of a guild's foundation. Every one was worth as much as an ordinary epic item. Tier 4 spells could do even more damage than gnome cannons and large ballistas, and not just because they commanded greater raw power. Players had full control of these spells. They could manipulate the spell's trajectories and implement combat techniques as they cast them. Blocking a single Tier 4 spell was impossible for current players, much less 3. Suddenly, a massive lightning bolt struck down on Shifeng with enough speed to break the sound barrier. At the same time, 12 dark arrows appeared around the swordsman, each with enough power to rival a mythic monster's attacks. Lastly, a gigantic tornado blotted out the sky as it rolled down toward Shifeng. These 3 spells sealed off any path of escape for Shifeng, and watching them move toward the swordsman was like watching Armageddon begin. The watching players felt their hearts skip a beat. The 3 Tier 4 spells' devastating power was stifling. How vicious. That guy's dead for sure now. Not even a mythic monster could take those spells without suffering severe injuries. The general populace hadn't expected Lake Mountain City's various major powers to be so vicious and decisive. Not even superpowers would casually waste Tier 4 magic scrolls on a single player. Death awaits any who oppose us. Let's see how you intend to block these attacks. The various major powers eagerly watched the Tier 4 spells assault Shifeng, waiting for the moment the swordsman died and dropped all of the items he had claimed thus far. However, as everyone expected the Tier 4 spells to devour Shifeng, the swordsman's aura exploded, and a strange black energy enveloped his body. Power of darkness. Scram. Shifeng bellowed as he brandished Killing Ray. Secret technique Lightning Flash. Sword lights immediately appeared around him, cutting down the incoming streams of mana. The lightning bolt and dark arrows scattered, and he sliced the descending tornado cleanly in two, dissipating the violent wind. Silence. As if time had frozen, silence filled Lake Mountain City. The city's independent players, the various major powers members, even Giant's Hearts members stared, dumbfounded. Those 3 Tier 4 spells would have even injured a mythic monster, yet Shifeng had countered all 3 with a single swing of his sword. How is this possible? The upper echelons from the 3 major powers that had used the Tier 4 magic scrolls were frozen in shock. They had originally saved the Tier 4 magic scrolls as trump cards to use against mythic monsters, yet Shifeng had stopped all 3 effortlessly. He hadn't even lost a single HP, much less been injured. So strong. Is this the true power of a Tier 3 class? Linya felt overwhelmed as she watched Shifeng. She had seen the strength of a Tier 3 class when Shifeng had fought the 2 rock giants outside the temple, but she hadn't realized that a Tier 3 class was powerful enough to nullify Tier 4 spells. With such strength, none of God's domain superpowers could touch Shifeng. He was on an entirely different level compared to Tier 2 players. Before a Tier 3 player, a Tier 2 player was no more than an infant learning how to walk. Thank goodness. I'm so glad I didn't pick a fight with him. I'd be doomed. Silent Rain inwardly celebrated after seeing Shi Feng emerge from the Tier 4 spell bombardment unscathed. Silent Rain had considered plotting a way to steal the Crimson Dragon flying ship, but after this performance he knew that not even a superpower's main army could take that swordsman down. Warblood and Starlin are truly unlucky to have provoked such an individual. White Autumn couldn't help but pity the two organizations. Warblood and Starlink would have already found Zero Wing to be an incredibly challenging opponent with its guardian puppets and Crimson Dragon flying ship, but with a player like Yi Feng to protect the guild as well, Zero Wing was essentially a natural disaster for the two organizations. After countering the 3 Tier 4 spells, Shi Feng glanced at the approaching players. These players, who still intended to fight for the Sunset King's loot, halted their steps immediately. Even the various major powers leading the charge stopped, quietly watching Shi Feng. None of them dared to take even half a step closer, afraid of attracting the swordsman's attention. They'd be gambling their lives if they tried to snatch the items from such a monstrous being. Even if they got their hands on one of the dropped items, they wouldn't be able to escape with it. They'd just become a target for Shi Feng to practice his swordsmanship. Seeing these players abandon their contest for the Sunset King's loot, Shi Feng turned around and resumed his work. Everyone merely watched as he quietly gathered the remaining items. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Who is that guy? Isn't he a little too strong? He actually deterred an entire city of players by himself. I know, right? Not even the Sea God's Realm's #1 player, Scarlet Hand, would be a match for him. The players in the vicinity began to admire Shi Feng. They were also incredibly curious about his identity. As for the Sunset King's loot, none of them dared object to the situation anymore. Once Shi Feng had collected the dropped items, he quickly approached White Autumn, handing over the mutated heart. If possible, he wanted to leave Lake Mountain City as soon as he could. He planned to return to White River City immediately. Only there would he be safe enough to appraise the Sunset King's loot. In return for the mutated heart, White Autumn gave Shi Feng a whopping 10 ocean barrier stones. Shi Feng then retrieved a return scroll and activated it, transforming into a streak of light and leaving the Sea God's realm. Chapter 2347, Extraordinary Loot. White River City's business district was full of advanced carriages and a variety of mounts. Meanwhile, the candlelight trading firm loomed over the street like a giant. A long line of players stood before the shop's entrance. Aside from those looking to purchase Candlelight's products, many were lifestyle players, seeking to improve themselves. They were there to take the Candlelight's recruitment test, hoping they'd be accepted into this sacred land for lifestyle players to become a respectable master lifestyle player eventually. A sea of players filled the shop itself, crowding around every counter in the firm and fighting desperately to purchase items. First-time visitors to the Candlelight trading firm were stunned by the scene. Isn't this just a shop? Why are so many people here? A level 96 female druid with a strong life aura muttered, surprised by the players around her. What is this shop selling? That's not what we're here to find out. Our main goal is to investigate the various kingdoms' alchemical standards. The sooner we finish our investigation, the sooner we can employ our Moon God's Realm's advantages, a male guardian knight who radiated a similar aura said. I guess you're right. The main continent's alchemy standards are far inferior to our world's. Once we verify the potions these people are selling, we can establish ourselves across the continent through our alchemy techniques. The female druid agreed, nodding. She then ignored the commotion on the first floor and headed up the stairs to the second. While the female druid and male guardian knight moved to the second floor, Shi Feng, who had overheard their conversation, couldn't help but pause. The Moon God's Realm? He watched the two players carefully after hearing mention of the Moon God's Realm. Otherworlds in God's domain varied in size. When the planar passages had activated, these otherworlds had gradually connected to the main continent according to size. The smaller otherworlds were the first to open to the main continent. Meanwhile, the Moon God's Realm was one of the largest otherworlds in God's domain, aside from higher planes. Now that the Moon God's Realm's players had arrived, the planar passages had opened fully. With all of the planar passages open, the otherworlds would truly begin to impact the continent. From this point onward, not only would the competition for dominance over level 100 neutral maps become more intense, but the status quo in the various kingdoms and empires would also shift. Some kingdoms and empires might even see a new ruling power. During Shifeng's previous life, the planar passages had greatly affected Star Moon Kingdom as well. Fortunately, Star Moon Kingdom had been a mid-ranked country among the many kingdoms on the continent, so none of the most powerful Otherworlds organizations had targeted the kingdom. Because of this, the various first-rate guilds that had ruled Star Moon Kingdom in the past had survived the chaos. Shifeng certainly hadn't expected the Moon God's realm's powers to target his kingdom in this life. This definitely wasn't good news to Zero Wing. If powers from an otherworld like the Moon God's realm targeted Zero Wing, the other powers from large-scale otherworlds wouldn't be able to ignore Star Moon Kingdom. It seems I'll have to take care of the situation in the Cold Spring Canyon quickly. With the quality and number of experts Zero Wing has, we cannot stop an assault from multiple large-scale otherworlds. Thinking up to this point, Shifeng picked up his speed. A sufficiently powerful expert might be able to turn the tides of war, but not even God's domain's strongest expert could affect multiple large-scale battles across an entire kingdom simultaneously. In the end, it would still be a competition of quantity and quality of experts as well as guild foundations. Although Zero Wing had the strength to contend with superpowers, its overall strength wasn't a match for an actual superpower. Once he had closed himself in one of the special forging rooms on the Candlelight Trading Firm's top floor, Shifeng pulled a Tier 3 Strengthening Magic Scroll from his bag and chanted the incantation. Strengthening Magic Scrolls could reinforce magic arrays. A Tier 3 Strengthening Magic Scroll was even effective on Grandmaster magic arrays. After activating the scroll, Shifeng targeted the forging room's defensive magic array. Now even a Tier 4 NPC would struggle to break down the door. The magic array should be strong enough now, Shifeng thought as he examined the magic runes carved into the walls. The runes brimmed with mana, significantly increasing their overall effects. Following which, Shifeng pulled one of the Sunset King's dropped items from his epic spatial bag after another. He wasn't being overly careful. Every item accompanied by a holy chant would be extraordinary, and all of these items had been sealed when they had dropped. These seals contain the item's auras, and the moment a player tried to appraise these items, the seals would vanish, exposing the item's true auras. Even while sealed, the combined aura the Sunset King's loot had radiated had been powerful enough that ordinary players hadn't been able to approach. Once Shifeng broke the seals, even a Tier 2 expert would likely have a hard time reaching for these items. This was why Shifeng had decided to appraise the items from within the Candlelight Trading Firm. Had he appraised the items in some random room in Lake Mountain City, it would have caused a huge commotion. Lake Mountain City's various major powers weren't fools. Just the loot's subdued aura had been enough of a reason for them to expend Tier 4 magic scrolls willingly. If they were exposed to the full strength of the loot's aura, even White Autumn might have been tempted to take action. As Shifeng appraised one item after another, the energy in the room grew more intense. By the time he had finished, the loot's combined aura had grown more than twice as strong. So these are holy chance items? There were as many as 6 Tier 4 magic scrolls alone. There were also 45 inferior legendary materials, 6 legendary materials, 26 units of 7 luminaries crystals, 3 god crystals, 4 pieces of level 100 epic equipment, and 1 level 100 epic weapon. Every one of the 5 epic items was top tier and could be used until level 150. Unfortunately, none of them suited Shifeng. The 4 pieces of epic equipment were pieces of the Dark Flare set, a 4-piece, epic set equipment for MTs. The 4-piece set effect increased its user's basic attributes by 30%, defense by 40%, and physique by 20%. It was undoubtedly a top-tier set equipment for MTs. As for the epic weapon, it was the Fantasy Blade, a 2-handed greatsword. Its attributes might be average, but its hidden effect, Blade Blur, was frightening. When it triggered, Fantasy Blade would ignore the opponent's defense and armor for 0.5 seconds, dealing direct damage to the target. Shifeng had also appraised a fragmented legendary weapon. Brilliant Silver, 2-handed staff, fragmented legendary rank, equipment requirement. Strength 800, Agility 800, Intelligence 2400 attack power, 210% of main attribute, all attributes increases according to user's level, when equipped. Strength increased by 40%, Carrotility increased by 40%, Intelligence increased by 70%, Endurance increased by 30%, Vitality increased by 50%, Casting speed increased by 35%, Spell completion rate increased by 4%, Spell critical rate increased by 35%, Stamina and Concentration consumption decreased by 20%. Ignore levels plus 20 additional passive skill 1 soul transition. Increases the user's soul by 1 tier. Can be increased up to tier 5. Additional passive skill 2 mana blessing. User spells have a certain chance to be upgraded by 1 tier. Can be increased up to tier 5. Additional passive skill 3 mana body. Increases mana body's effect by 1 rank. Additional active skill 1 void field. All magic damage received decreased by 80%. All spells effects increased by 100%. Physique increased by 60%. Duration, 1 minute cooldown, 2 hours additional active skill 2 void blade. Summons 18 blades using the power of void. Each blade possesses strength equal to 120% of the user's main attribute and deals divine damage. Duration, 30 seconds. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU cooldown, 5 minutes. Brilliant Silver had once belonged to the Void Creator. However, its core had been severely damaged when the staff had been used to repair the world's heart. In addition, to gain full control of the staff, one must be acknowledged by the Void Creator. Repairing it requires 10 God Crystals. God Crystals required to repair Brilliant Silver, 0/10. Brilliant Silver was suitable for any magical class expert and would qualitatively transform a player's combat power. Its ability to improve its user's mana body was particularly useful to Tier 3 players. However, none of these items could compare to the most valuable item the Sunset King had dropped in Shifeng's eyes. Not even the other items' total value could compare to this single item. The 4-star shop promotion order. Chapter 2348. 4-star shop. Mainstream players haven't even reached level 100, yet Zero Wing is about to own a 4-star shop. If the various superpowers in the past knew about this, they'd die from envy. Shifeng couldn't help his growing excitement as he gazed at the shining, black token in his hand. A 4-star shop promotion order was roughly worth as much as a fragmented legendary item, but it was far more difficult to obtain. Even of the many superpowers in God's domain, only a minority could obtain a 4-star shop promotion order. No power would trade a 4-star shop promotion order, even if offered a legendary item. Similar to the qualitative transformation players undergone when they rose from Tier 2 to Tier 3, shops would transform when they were upgraded from 3-star to 4-star status. Shops in God's domain were considered basic rank from 1 to 3-star status, but once they reached 4-star status, they become an advanced shop. Not only would all of the shop's existing functions improve, but it would also gain new major functions. The first was the Research Workshop. The Research Workshop would be tremendously helpful to lifestyle players as they worked to rise through the ranks. Not even the Philosopher's Hand or Moon God's Secret Journal could compete. The Research Workshop could examine data on existing items and identify their deficiencies. Players could then modify and improve these items, thereby creating a new item. It was easy to imagine how helpful this would be to lifestyle players. The Research Workshops were a large part of the reason the various superpowers had been able to nurture Master, even Grandmaster, lifestyle players during Shifeng's previous life. Without these workshops, the various superpowers would have, at most, been able to nurture Master lifestyle players, even if they relied on all sorts of rare materials. None of them would have had enough super rare materials to nurture a Grandmaster. Now that Zero Wing had access to a Research Workshop, the guild could have a large batch of Master lifestyle players in no time with how many talented lifestyle players it already had. God's Domain's designs for high-ranked weapons and equipment were incredibly rare already, but after level 100, rare would be an understatement. Trying to obtain a high-quality design would be like trying to win the lottery. Hence, the various major powers would have to rely on lifestyle players for such items. Of course, creating a high-ranked level 100+ weapon or equipment piece was easier said than done. Because of this, the cost for high-ranked level 100+ weapons and equipment would skyrocket as mainstream players reached level 100. Not even ordinary expert players would be able to afford such items. In fact, some ordinary experts would be stuck using level 100 equipment even after they reached level 110. Meanwhile, this scarcity would only begin to subside as 4-star shops began to emerge. The various major powers experts would still need some time to reach level 100, not to mention the time they'd need to obtain high-quality level-appropriate weapons and equipment. Zero Wing's experts were no exception. If Zero Wing could secure a source of weapons and equipment early on, these items would be immensely helpful to the guild's experts as they gained more combat power and cleared their Tier 3 promotion quests. The second ability the shop would gain with its 4-star status would help a power dominate the market. The shared warehouse. At 4-star status, a shop would gain a shared warehouse and the ability to create similar warehouses in 5 3-star shops. These shared warehouses would be connected. The function might not seem glamorous, but countless powers dreamed of having such an ability. With a shared warehouse, a power could transfer items across long distances at no cost, including non-bag space items. Transporting non-bag space items had always been a huge problem in God's domain, and the shared warehouse was one of the few methods that could solve this problem. Because of this, the various powers of Shifeng's previous life had fought to promote their shops to 4-star status, with some even trading legendary items for the promotion order. There was a catch, of course. Once items had been placed in the shared warehouse, they'd be frozen for 24 hours, locked in the warehouse. Moreover, there was an extremely limited amount of space for non-bag space items. At the 4-star status, the shared warehouse could only hold up to 200 non-bag space items at a time. Even so, the function would save a lot of money in transportation time. Most importantly, this method of relocating items was safe. Had Shadow possessed a 4-star shop during Shifeng's previous life, the guild wouldn't have taken so many risks to move highly valuable non-bag space items, getting robbed by powerful NPCs. Unfortunately, 4-star shop promotion orders were painfully rare in God's domain. Only a small number of superpowers could enjoy the luxury of owning a 4-star shop. Due to these two functions, not even powers with 100 3-star shops could compete with those that had a 4-star and a few 3-star shops for dominance over the market. Thinking up to this point, Shifeng collected the Sunset King's loot in his bag and stored the 7 Luminaries crystals and God crystals in his private warehouse. He then made his way to the city hall to upgrade the Candlelight trading firm to a 4-star shop. He also notified Melancholic Smile and had her mass recruit players for Candlelight's internal membership, pausing normal recruitment for now. Previously, Candlelight hadn't met the conditions for expansion. The trading firm only had a limited number of special workshops and meditation rooms after all. Moreover, competition between the various trading firms hadn't been particularly intense as designs for high-quality weapons and equipment below level 100 were relatively easy to obtain. However, that was about to change. Any design or recipe a player found in a level 100+ neutral map would be incredibly valuable. Now that Candlelight was about to have a 4-star shop, Shifeng couldn't allow the trading firm to operate as liberally as it had been. Moreover, otherworld players were flooding to the main continent, and they would have a massive impact on the status quo, especially those from otherworlds like the Moon God's realm, who focused on lifestyle development. Otherworlds like these would have a huge impact on the main continent's economy. To compete against these otherworlds, Candlelight would need to nurture its lifestyle players to a higher standard. However, Candlelight had many secrets it had to protect. Thus, it would need more internal members, not normal members. Guild leader, our recruitment requirements are already quite demanding. If we start recruiting with these standards, I'm afraid that other powers will use the opportunity to poach some of our members, Melancholic Smile cautioned after listening to Shifeng's new requirements. Few of God's domain's lifestyle players enjoyed being bound by strict contracts. Hence, the various major powers typically offered relaxed conditions. If Candlelight increased its requirements, they'd be lucky not to lose normal members, much less recruit new internal members. Furthermore, Starlink was still trying to steal Candlelight's members. If they increased the trading firm's strict conditions, Candlelight would suffer for it. Relax. That is only true if they can steal our members, Shifeng said, chuckling. He then held up the 4-star shop promotion order to the display and continued, "What do you think this is? Is that a 4-star shop promotion order?" Melancholic Smile's eyes went wide with shock when she saw the black token. Guild leader, is that real? Many superpowers had upgraded their own shops to 3-star status by now, and as a result, Candlelight's advantages became less prominent by the day. As a result, Candlelight's advantages were continuously shrinking by the day. Now the trading firm could only rely on its secret techniques to attract new members. If Candlelight had a 4-star shop, however, it would reclaim its lead over its competition. Of course it's real, Shifeng said, chuckling. I'll leave the recruitment to you. We need to get this done as quickly as possible. All right. I'll make the announcement immediately. Melancholic Smile nodded. Melancholic Smile did as she promised, and news quickly spread that Candlelight was mass recruiting for internal members in the various kingdoms and empires. What's Candlelight trying to do? It's only recruiting internal members? Candlelight has become too arrogant after being named a sacred land for lifestyle players. Not only are its recruitment requirements so high, but all applicants must become internal members as well? Lifestyle players would be better off joining a different guild. They'd have more freedom than in Candlelight. Candlelight's latest recruitment announcement enraged many lifestyle players, and quite a few of them who had intended to apply, promptly abandoned the idea. Meanwhile, two players radiating powerful life auras lounged in one of White River City's advanced restaurants. They were none other than the female druid and male guardian knight from the moon god's realm who had come to investigate Star Moon Kingdom's alchemical standards. Across from them sat a woman that fit the idea of a cool beauty, to a T. She wore an intermediate master alchemist's insignia pinned to her chest. "I didn't expect to find you here, Silent, but you won't have a future if you choose to continue developing in this kingdom. Zero Wing can't help you. Why don't you just join Dark Pursuit? With your standards, you're guaranteed to earn a high position in the guild, and you'll have access to plenty of resources, including resources Candlelight can't ever hope to offer," the female druid suggested, trying to persuade Silent Wonder. Memory is right. The main continent's alchemical resources are too scarce. Not even the superpowers here can compare to Dark Pursuit's alchemical resources, much less Zero Wing. Yen Xiaoqin has already received a lot of support and resources from Dark Pursuit. Do you really want to lose the family competition to her? The male guardian knight asked. You know that you don't have much time left. I understand, but I need a little more time to think about it, Silent Wonder said hesitantly. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. You Silent, you can't keep putting this off. If you can't decide, I might as well have a talk with your guild leader. I don't mind showing him the difference between our strengths if he refuses to let you go, the female druid, Cold Memory, declared, raising a fist. I'll go with you. I doubt he'd dare waste more of Silent's time once he hears Dark Pursuit's name, the male guardian knight nodded. Elsewhere, Shifeng had arrived at White River City Hall. Hello, sir. How may I be of service? The NPC beauty behind the VIP counter amicably asked Shifeng. I wish to upgrade the Candlelight trading firm to 4-star status. Here is the promotion order, Shifeng said as he handed the promotion order to the NPC. Chapter 2349, New Candlelight Trading Firm. When the NPC administrator saw the 4-star shop promotion order, she gave Shifeng an odd look. Sir, do you really wish to promote your shop to 4-star status? She asked for confirmation. Is there a problem? Shifeng asked strangely. As far as Shifeng could remember, the city hall managed shop promotions within its city. Although he had never upgraded a shop to 4-star status before, the process should not be any different than the previous upgrades. Sir, a 4-star shop isn't like normal shops. If you promote your shop to 4-star status as per our prior agreement, the kingdom's laws will no longer be able to protect your shop. Rather, you will take full control and responsibility for the land and any danger you encounter, the NPC administrator slowly explained. I will have complete ownership of the land? Realization dawned on Shifeng. He had never thought that 4-star shops would have such a secret. It was no wonder why 4-star shops he had visited in the past had seemed somewhat odd. When Shifeng had visited 4-star shops in his past, he had noticed that many peak experts had been stationed in the shops long-term. They had become a normal sight. He had assumed the ruling powers had simply meant to deter other experts that ignored NPC soldiers. However, it seemed there had been a much greater reason. With the country's protection, players could do whatever they wanted in these shops, and NPC soldiers wouldn't even bat an eye. If they stole from the shop, they wouldn't have to worry about the NPC soldiers capturing and jailing them for a month, and the various large guild shops usually sold incredibly precious treasures. If players could steal these items without repercussions, they'd certainly try. If a power weren't strong enough to protect their products in 4-star shop, the shop they had gone to such great lengths to nurture would be crippled. Sir, do you still wish to promote your shop? The NPC administrator asked again. Yes, Shifeng decided. There was a lot of risk to upgrading a shop to 4-star status, but the risks were insignificant compared to the benefits. Now, all he had to do was to figure out how to improve the shop's security. The cost of rebuilding and expanding your territory will be calculated independently. Here are the reconstruction and expansion options. You may choose whichever you wish. If you are not satisfied with the results, you may reconstruct and expand again, the NPC administrator said, smiling as she handed Shifeng a list. How vicious. Shifeng was flabbergasted when he saw the stated prices. Reconstruction meant adding new floors to the shop. In this regard he had 3 choices: 12 floors, 15 floors and 21 floors. They would cost 20,000 gold, 40,000 gold, and 100,000 gold respectively. The expansion cost was even more ruthless. Gaining 40% more land would cost 50,000 gold, while each additional 10% would cost 30,000 gold to a maximum of a 100% expansion. This was even more expensive than constructing a city. First-rate guilds would be considered quite wealthy if they had 50,000 gold in liquid funds, yet that was only a fraction of the cost for reconstructing and expanding the shop. Although Zero Wing had recently earned a lot of money, with around 170,000 gold in liquid funds, it couldn't afford to splurge on a 4-star shop. The guild still needed to pay the recruitment costs for 5,000 NPC knights after all. Shifeng's hesitation didn't last long, however. After a moment he chose the 21-story option and expanded the shop's land by 40%. Unlike 3-star shops, which had a fixed number of special workshops and meditation rooms, a 4-star shop with more floors could contain more special workshops and meditations rooms. For example, the 15-story version would only have 30 special workshops, while the 21-story building would have 50 special workshops. As for the basic meditation room, a 21-story shop would have as many as 12 in total, which would be more than enough to satisfy Candlelight's lifestyle players. In fact, it would be enough to allow Shifeng to reserve one for himself. Unfortunately, the number of total floors wouldn't affect the number of research workshops the shop possessed. Even in the 21-story shop, the shop would only have a single research workshop. As for the additional land, that would only allow the shop to accommodate more players. Hence, Shifeng prioritized the number of floors for his shop over the shop's size. "Alright. Your bill comes to 155,000 gold, the NPC administrator said, flashing Shifeng a bright smile. Once you've completed the payment, our men will head over and start the reconstruction. The process should take half an hour. During this time, nobody will be allowed into the shop." "That won't be a problem," Shifeng replied. His heart ached a little as he handed over the payment. He had just spent a ridiculous amount of money, but with a 4-star shop's abilities, he could likely earn it all back within the first week. Even during his previous life, research workshops had been one of the best tools to nurture lifestyle players. Since he still had some time before mainstream players reached level 100, the research workshop would be priceless. Meanwhile, after Shifeng completed the payment, the NPC administrator handed him the deed to the Candlelight trading firm. Once the shop's reconstruction was complete, White River City's Candlelight trading firm would become Shifeng's personal possession. He would then be responsible for the shop's security. With this task complete, Shifeng left the city hall and returned to the Candlelight trading firm. He intended to spend some time planning the shop's security measures. However, halfway through his journey, Melancholic Smile called. "Guild leader, 2 people are here to meet you. They've identified themselves as Dark Pursuit's representatives and say that they'd like to negotiate a partnership," Melancholic Smile excitedly reported. Any player that had spent time in the virtual gaming world knew about the guild known as Dark Pursuit. The Super Guild was famous for its focus on support classes. Although Dark Pursuit did not operate on the main continent, no power dared to underestimate it. If Candlelight could secure an alliance with the Super Guild, it could gain some serious advantages. Partnership. The news confused Shifeng. He had never expected Dark Pursuit to seek cooperation with Zero Wing. "I understand. Have them head to the Candlelight trading firm. I'll be there in a moment." Following which, Shifeng picked up his pace and hurried toward the Candlelight trading firm. Meanwhile, chaos filled the street outside of the Candlelight trading firm. As soon as Shifeng had paid for the promotion, every player that had been in the shop had been teleported to the street outside. The abrupt interruption had left the shoppers and Candlelight members stunned. "What's going on? Why was I forced out of the shop? Crap. I wasn't done shopping. What is Candlelight trying to do? Does it want our business or not?" The customers that had been teleported out of the shop flew into a rage. "He requested us to meet him here, yet closed the shop? Is Zero Wing's guild leader toying with us?" Cold Memory, who had just arrived, snarled. Her investigation into Zero Wing's Candlelight trading firm had been quite thorough. The lifestyle players that worked for the trading firm had excellent standards. Candlelight even had 3 basic meditation rooms, which were incredibly helpful to lifestyle players. However, it was still significantly weaker than Dark Pursuit. Dark Pursuit had basic meditation rooms, but it also had intermediate meditation rooms. Naturally, the intermediate meditation rooms were more effective than the basic version and could greatly improve a lifestyle player's production success rates. Since the guild's elders supported Yen Xiaoqian, Silent Wonder's opponent in the upcoming competition, they allowed her to use the intermediate meditation room for up to 3 hours per day. Because of this, her development speed was astonishing. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. I am familiar with guild leader Black Flame's general disposition. He wouldn't play such an underhanded trick. I suspect he's ordered impromptu renovations for the shop. Let's just wait for a bit, Silent Wonder said. Renovations? Is it necessary to cause such a scene just for a simple renovation? Cold Memory muttered disdainfully. The various powers did renovate their shops from time to time to attract more customers, but no matter how many renovations they did, they'd at most change the interior design. Not long after Cold Memory's comment, the magic barrier enveloping the candlelight trading firm dissipated. As it did, it revealed a 100-meter-tall building. The nearby player-owned shops, which were only 4 or 5 stories tall, and the NPC shops, which were about a dozen stories tall, looked like children next to the upgraded candlelight trading firm. Chapter 2350 Crazy Masters. The candlelight trading firm's new appearance stupefied every player on the street. It underscores massive. What did Zero Wing do? They were overcome with shock as they gazed up at the humongous candlelight trading firm. The surrounding player-owned shops might look extravagant, but they were nothing compared to Candlelight's 100-meter-tall shop. The merchant players were particularly stunned, staring with wide eyes and dropped jaws at the new candlelight trading firm shop. Ordinary players didn't usually understand God's Domain's rules regarding its shops, but merchant players like them were very familiar with these rules and regulations. Shop construction in NPC cities was heavily regulated. Players couldn't simply build as many floors as they wanted. For example, a 3-star shop could only have up to 9 floors. And yet, the candlelight trading firm in White River City now had 21 floors. Not only could a shop display more merchandise with more floors, but it could also house more lifestyle players. An ordinary shop's environment couldn't compare to that of the various subclasses associations, but once it reached 3-star status, a shop would offer better advanced workshops than the subclass associations. This was one of the factors that attracted so many lifestyle players to White River City's candlelight trading firm. Moreover, there wasn't a limit to how many advanced workshops a 3-star shop could have as long as it had enough space for all of them. What's going on? How can a player-owned shop in an NPC city have 21 floors? Cold Memory stared at the candlelight trading firm in shock. When she had investigated the main continent's shops, the largest she had seen had only been 9 stories tall, yet the candlelight trading firm before her had more than double that. It also occupied more land than other 3-star shops. Did he promote the candlelight trading firm? South Dream, the male guardian knight, murmured as he considered a possibility. However, he couldn't be certain about the idea. I'm pretty sure he promoted it to 4-star status. It wouldn't have transformed so massively otherwise. Silent Wonder nodded. Although she seemed calm, she was just as surprised as her 2 companions. Promoting a shop was an incredibly difficult task, especially after it had reached 3-star status. Even at this stage of the game, very few superpowers had 3-star shops. However, it seemed that the candlelight trading firm now has a 4-star shop, which would give it major advantages. It seems Zero Wing is quite capable after all, but so what if it has a 4-star shop? Cold Memory said, clicking her tongue. Haughtily she continued, Dark Pursuit has already captured an ancient civilization's town and owns an intermediate meditation room, which no one on the main continent has acquired. How could a shop compare to a town? Ancient civilizations had greater technology than what could be found in the current kingdoms and empires, and Dark Pursuit had secured an ancient civilization's town that specialized in lifestyle development in the moon god's realm. The technology in that town easily surpasses any within a mere shop. Moreover, as the town developed, the guild would unlock more advantages. The shop's open now. Let's head inside, Silent Wonder said. Silent Wonder didn't try to argue with Cold Memory. The woman had already shown her proof, and she had to admit that the moon god's realm's lifestyle standards were far beyond that of the main continent. Moreover, Dark Pursuit's alchemical techniques were just as impressive as Zero Wing's. Hence, Cold Memory qualified to be so arrogant. Meanwhile, Melancholic Smile had been waiting before the candlelight's entrance for quite some time. When she saw Silent Wonder's group approach, she led them inside, earning the surrounding players envy and admiration. Everyone was curious about the candlelight trading firm's promotion, and they all wanted to inspect the new changes for themselves, especially the lifestyle players who had come to join the trading firm. However, non-members weren't allowed to enter the shop at the moment. They had to wait outside, which was why they jealously watched Cold Memory and South Dream, both outsiders, enter the shop. As they entered the building, Silent Wonder, Cold Memory, and South Dream were shocked by what they saw. When they entered the shop, they felt as if they had just stepped into an entirely different world. Not only was the shop's interior far more magnificent and brilliant than it had been earlier, but its mana density was twice as high as well. They felt incredibly calm and clear-headed as they stood in the doorway. As Cold Memory and South Dream followed Melancholic Smile to the candlelight trading firm's top floor, what they saw on the various floors rendered them speechless. There were now more than 40 special workshops and as many as 12 basic meditation rooms. It was enough to rival the number in the ancient civilization's town. Fortunately for them, Candlelight didn't seem to have an intermediate meditation room, which meant Cold Memory and South Dream still had a chance of dragging Silent Wonder into Dark Pursuit. Melancholic Smile quickly led Silent Wonder and her companions to the top floor. As the group was about to enter the top floor reception room, Cold Memory and South Dream noticed a commotion at the end of the corridor. A group of players crowded before a door made of magic crystals, looking in with ecstatic expressions. To Cold Memory and South Dream, those players looked like a pack of wolves that hadn't eaten for several days. What astonished the two outsiders, however, was the fact that every one of those players wore the insignia of a lifestyle master. Sister Melancholic, can I use the research workshop for a moment? I promise I'll be quick. Melancholic, we're all core members and just a step away from reaching intermediate master rank. I'll even hand over all of my GCPs to use the research workshop for 3 days. Crap. You want 3 days? I'd be satisfied to use it for 1 day. Every one of these master lifestyle players gave Melancholic Smile desperate, passionate looks. Afraid that she'd reject their requests, they offered everything they had to convince her. Have these people gone insane? When Cold Memory saw the master lifestyle players' behavior, her worldview shifted. Even in the various superpowers, master lifestyle players enjoyed VIP treatment, yet these candlelight masters were begging Melancholic Smile just to enter a room, the research workshop. Her guild's master lifestyle players would call her crazy if she told them about this. Even the intermediate meditation room was only slightly helpful to master lifestyle players. It wasn't such a treasure that players would beg and bribe to use it. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. You calm down. We have yet to decide the rules for the research workshop, and we're not letting anyone use it until we do. Once the guild leader has set up the rules, any internal member that has successfully become a master will get an opportunity to use it, Melancholic Smile said, attempting to placate the crowd. The master lifestyle players seemed satisfied with Melancholic Smile's response, and they said nothing more. She had already confirmed that the trading firm's internal master lifestyle players would get an opportunity to use the room, and for now that was good enough. All they had to do was wait. Even so, they still stared at the door longingly as they left. Shopkeeper Melancholic, may I know what that research workshop is? South Dream asked curiously. In Dark Pursuit, a basic lifestyle master enjoyed the same status as peak experts like himself. Intermediate masters had an even higher rank in the guild than he did. However, quite a few of those master lifestyle players had been intermediate masters, yet they begged Melancholic Smile to let them into the research workshop. Why wouldn't it make him curious? The research workshop? That's a new room our shop has gained with its promotion to 4-star status. Since no one is using it right now, why don't we head in and take a look? Melancholic Smile suggested. Rather than keeping the room a secret, she invited Cold Memory and South Dream inside. Chapter 2351, Frightening Research Workshop. After they made their way over to the research workshop, Melancholic Smile slowly pushed open the heavy, crystalline doors. As the doors parted, incomparably dense mana flooded out. Even Silent Wonder, who was used to working in high mana density environments, felt refreshed as the workshop's mana hit her. She felt as if she had just woken from a sweet dream. Cold Memory and South Dream, on the other hand, stared at the research workshop in astonishment, unable to process what was happening even as their minds became clear and sharp. How can this room have such high mana density? Cold Memory gave the workshop an incredulous look. There was a special magic array that could gather an immense amount of mana in the ancient civilization town Dark Pursuit had captured. Hence, the mana density within the town was unusually high. Naturally, the town's intermediate meditation room had the highest mana density in the town, but compared to this research workshop, the intermediate meditation room's mana density was a joke. Cold Memory couldn't fathom how a mere shop had such incredible mana density. However, what she saw as she entered the research workshop shocked her even more. The majority of the research workshop had been constructed with magic crystals, and some parts of the workshop were even made with mana stones. The room was like a magic crystal cave. In the research workshop, our members can study new designs and recipes. Not only is the mana density here extremely high, but the room also has a special instrument that can analyze all sorts of items, giving players the information they need to strengthen and modify their work to create new and better designs and recipes. Melancholic Smile introduced. Assist players in creating new designs and recipes. Impossible. Cold Memory and South Dream instinctively denied Melancholic Smile's claim. Almost every player in the Moon God's realm understood how difficult it was to reach the next lifestyle promotion. Once lifestyle players reached the advanced rank, their greatest hurdle was the creation of new designs and recipes. If it were possible to increase players' chances of creating new designs, a power could nurture master lifestyle players far faster than its competition. For advanced lifestyle players, accumulating enough proficiency points for their promotion to master rank was easy, but the same couldn't be said for creating new designs and recipes. The task required a lot of materials and experimentation. The amount of gold and resources an advanced lifestyle player would need was astronomical. Because of the cost, the various major powers were very careful when selecting advanced lifestyle players to nurture. Dark Pursuit's intermediate meditation room only helped clear players' minds so they could focus when producing items. It couldn't help them create new items. I see that the two of you are advanced alchemists. Why don't you give it a try? You can see for yourselves whether or not I'm telling the truth, Melancholic Smile said. She wasn't surprised that her two guests refused to believe her. When she had first learned about the research workshop's function, even she found it hard to believe. To lifestyle players, gaining access to the research workshop's ability was akin to combat players getting their hands on a tool with godly abilities. It was expected that Cold MEM and South Dream would be skeptical about the research workshop. We'll have to trouble you then, shopkeeper Melancholic. With Melancholic Smile's blessing, Cold Memory saw no reason to hold back. Her declaration was simply impossible. Zero Wing was merely lying to people in an attempt to look good before Dark Pursuit. Following which, Melancholic Smile spent 1,000 magic crystals to activate the research workshop's instrument. As soon as she did, the mana density in the room rose. What a powerful mana. It's no wonder why she made such a foolish claim. Even if she were lying about the workshop's ability, such an environment would be immensely helpful when creating new items. South Dream was flabbergasted as he felt the room's mana density change. Unlike her companion, however, Cold Memory wasn't yet convinced. She retrieved a bottle of Breath of Life, an advanced potion, from her bag and placed it on the workshop scanner. She then waited for the research workshop to analyze the potion. Her lack of reaction rendered South Dream speechless. He thought she was taking this a little too seriously. The Breath of Life was a super rare advanced potion in God's domain. When consumed, it reduced the amount of EXP players would lose after their next death. The potion was just slightly less difficult to brew than a master potion. As a potion that was close to master rank, modifying the Breath of Life potion further was incredibly challenging. Even master alchemists struggled to accomplish the feat. How much help could the research workshop's apparatus possibly provide? However, before South Dream could try to dissuade Cold Memory, the research workshop's apparatus completed its analysis. Immediately, the holographic screen displayed a mass of information. How is this possible? South Dream's eyes nearly fell out of their sockets when he saw the lines of data. After conducting its analysis, the apparatus had revealed 11 aspects that required modification and 6 aspects that could be strengthened. The situation even shocked Silent Wonder, not to mention her visitors. She had researched the Breath of Life potion as well, but with her current alchemical standards and knowledge, she had only found 3 aspects that needed modification and 1 that could be strengthened. She wasn't far from becoming an advanced master alchemist, and Zero Wing had provided her with plenty of alchemical information. These were the only reasons that she had been able to improve the Breath of Life potion to such an extent. Any other master alchemists would likely struggle to modify the potion successfully without extensive research into the recipe. As for Cold Memory, she was utterly dumbfounded when she saw the data on the research workshop's holographic screen. She had dedicated a lot of time to researching the Breath of Life potion, searching for the key that would allow her to become a master alchemist, but after all her research and experiments, she had been stuck in a dead end. So, that's the case. I made a mistake there. It's no wonder why I never succeeded. Cold Memory couldn't help her elation as she read the information. She had found a clue to one of the modification aspects the research workshop pointed out, but she hadn't been able to follow that clue to the end, even after countless experiments. Eventually, she had given up on the clue, tired of wasting her time. She hadn't actually realized that she had been on the right track. The herbs she had used just hadn't been potent enough. If she replaced those herbs with higher quality ones, she'd substantially increase her success rate. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Considering this fact, Cold Memory began to conduct a test. She always carried the materials necessary to brew the Breath of Life potion to ensure that she could experiment when inspiration struck her. Fortunately, the research workshop had just the facilities she needed and incredibly dense mana. It was the perfect place to brew a potion. In less than 10 minutes, Cold Memory had successfully created a bottle of dark blue liquid that radiated incredible life energy, far stronger than the life energy the prior Breath of Life potion had radiated. It's a success. I succeeded. After appraising the dark blue potion, Cold Memory turned to her companion with a bright, excited expression. She had just become a master alchemist, standing at the apex of God's domain's alchemy industry. Chapter 2352. He's Tier 3. She succeeded just like that? South Dream stared at the excited Cold Memory in shock. He was very familiar with her alchemy standards, which were basically on par with his. Hence, he knew that she should have needed a lot more time and effort to become a master alchemist. And yet, after a few minutes in the research workshop, she had completed her promotion. If he told his guildmates about this, the other alchemists would likely think he'd gone mad. The various superpowers respected master lifestyle players because they were so rare. Less than 1% of the lifestyle players in God's domain had the potential to reach the master rank, and each one that succeeded would have dedicated a lot of time and effort into their craft. However, it seemed that lifestyle players could easily cross that threshold by relying on the research workshop, saving a lot of time, effort, and resources. In other words, Zero Wing could now nurture master lifestyle players far more easily than the various superpowers. So long as Zero Wing willed it, it could likely produce a large group of master lifestyle players as it needed. What do you two think of the research workshop's effects? Melancholic Smile asked, chuckling lightly when she saw the Cold Memory's ecstatic expression and South Dream's surprised reaction. In truth, even Melancholic Smile was surprised at how quickly Cold Memory had been promoted to Master Alchemist, after just a few minutes of using the research workshop. Shifeng had told her that nurturing master lifestyle players would still be a major hurdle, even with the research workshop's help. The workshop merely provided guidelines. Whether or not players could follow those guidelines depended on their abilities. To put it simply, the research workshop was simply a support tool. When they heard Melancholic Smile's question, Cold Memory and South Dream realized they had lost their composure. With a fake, dry cough, Cold Memory awkwardly said, "Not bad. This research workshop is certainly helpful in creating new items, as you said." She tried to play it off, but the research workshop had completely exceeded her expectations. She had a far better understanding of the workshop's power than her companion. Initially, she had assumed she'd be limited to the Master Alchemist standard, but after using the research workshop, she could see herself becoming a Grandmaster Alchemist in the future. A Grandmaster Alchemist. Even Dark Pursuit's top alchemists struggled to reach such a prestigious rank. Currently, they estimated that their chances of reaching the Grandmaster rank were less than 10%, but if she could use the research workshop long-term, she was confident that she had as high as a 30% chance of becoming a Grandmaster Alchemist. South Dream could only nod in response to Melancholic Smile's question. He simply didn't know what to say. They had come to inform Zero Wing of the difference between their guilds when it came to developing lifestyle players. However, not only had they discovered that Zero Wing had just as many basic meditations rooms as Dark Pursuit, but the guild also had a godly tool like the research workshop. What could he possibly say? What confused South Dream the most was that, despite not being a superpower, Zero Wing had already gotten its hands on such powerful training resources for lifestyle players. I'm glad it's to your satisfaction. Our guild leader is waiting in the reception room. We should meet him, Melancholic Smile said, a slow smile forming as she watched her visitor's silent reactions. While Melancholic Smile led them to the reception room, Cold Memory and South Dream had a private conversation through their team chat. Memory, Zero Wing is better equipped to nurture lifestyle players than we expected. Not even out intermediate meditation room is a match for that research workshop, South Dream said, smiling bitterly. I'm afraid that we don't have the resources to offer in exchange for wonder. They had planned to offer Zero Wing training resources in exchange for nullifying Silent Wonder's contract with the guild. After all, Dark Pursuit's training resources were far superior to what the main continent's various powers possessed. If Zero Wing agreed, it'd give up Silent Wonder, but it would acquire the ability to nurture several more lifestyle players. It was definitely a tempting offer. But it seemed the situation wasn't what they had thought. With the research workshop, Zero Wing was even better equipped to nurture master lifestyle players than Dark Pursuit. In fact, if Dark Pursuit's upper echelons and guild elders found out about this, they'd likely offer Zero Wing a huge sum of gold and resources to purchase time in the research workshop for their own lifestyle players. If they tried to offer Zero Wing training resources now, they'd make fools of themselves. It's too early to give up, Cold Memory said, gritting her teeth. I admit that Zero Wing's ability to nurture lifestyle players is impressive, but don't forget that strength is the most important factor in God's domain. Even if Zero Wing can nurture an army of master lifestyle players, it doesn't necessarily have the strength to protect them. Not only does our guild have excellent training resources, but we're also far stronger than Zero Wing. We can simply offer Zero Wing protection in exchange for wonder. That should be tempting enough. Based on our reports, many otherworld powers have begun to move against Star Moon Kingdom in secret. Surviving in such a situation will be a major challenge for Zero Wing, but if the guild had Dark Pursuit's protection, it might be a different story. Most importantly, Wonder's competition with Yen Xiaoqian isn't limited to alchemy. With Zero Wing's foundations, how could it possibly provide the same resources Yen Xiaoqian currently receives? Zero Wing's lifestyle facilities had certainly taken her by surprise, but strength was more important than anything in God's domain. With Zero Wing's current strength, staying in the guild would do more harm than good to Silent Wonder in the long run. She might even unintentionally drag her family down with her if she stayed in this guild. I guess you're right. We can't let Wonder waste any more time in Zero Wing, South Dream said. After giving the matter some thought, he agreed with Cold Memory's view of the situation. If the competition between Silent Wonder and Yen Xiaoqian only involved alchemy standards, allowing her to remain in Zero Wing wouldn't be an issue. However, that wasn't the case. This was also a competition of strength. Since Yen Xiaoqian had joined Dark Pursuit, Silent Wonder would be at a disadvantage if she didn't do the same. In fact, she might even be disqualified before she had the chance to compete against Yen Xiaoqian. While Cold Memory and South Dream silently conversed, the group arrived before the top-floor reception room. Guild leader, Dark Pursuit's representatives are here, Melancholic Smile declared as she gently pushed open the doors. Come in, Shifeng said, nodding. Hearing Shifeng's reply, Melancholic Smile led Cold Memory's group into the reception room. The instant the two Dark Pursuit representatives entered the room, they felt an incomparably powerful aura wash over them. For a moment they nearly stumbled. What a strong life aura. Is he really a player? Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. The two looked at Shifeng in disbelief as the man sat at the reception room's desk. As players from the Moon God's realm, they were far more sensitive to life hours than ordinary players, and the aura they felt from Shifeng was like nothing they had ever felt before from a player. The gap between their life ratings and Shifeng's was obvious. If not for the green marker hovering above Shifeng's head, they would have suspected that the man before them was actually a monster in human skin. Not even players with a god's blessing radiate such an intense life aura. Has he already reached Tier 3? South Dream wondered in their team chat. Tier 3? How is this possible? Cold Memory could not help but stare at the swordsman, utterly astonished. Chapter 2353, Bit off more than they could chew. What is this guild? As Cold Memory stared at Shifeng, she felt as if she were hallucinating. Before she had actually met the man, she had considered what she might say to persuade him. She refused to believe that he wouldn't be interested in the conditions she had to offer. However, as she met Shifeng face to face, her words caught in her throat. The fact that they hadn't known about Zero Wing's research workshop wasn't a major issue. The Candlelight trading firm had just been promoted to 4-star status, after all. It was expected that there would be some deviation to their investigation results. However, they had also just found out that Zero Wing's guild leader was already a Tier 3 player. A Tier 3 player. None of Dark Pursuit's players had even reached level 100 yet, much less complete their Tier 3 promotion quests. At this stage of the game they knew how massive the gap was between tiers. A Tier 3 player could give the current superpowers massive headaches. Killing Tier 2 players would be child's play for a Tier 3 player. Moreover, due to how soon Shifeng had reached Tier 3, he could benefit his guild far more than before. The main god system had specifically prepared level 100 neutral maps for Tier 3 players. Exploring such maps was impossible for current players. Realizing that Cold Memory was dazed, South Dream gritted his teeth and stepped forward. "Greetings, Guild Leader Black Flame. I am South Dream, a main force vice commander from Dark Pursuit's 4th branch." South Dream nervously introduced himself. "My companion is Cold Memory. She is one of the main force vice commanders from the 4th branch as well. We are here to represent our guild in negotiations concerning a partnership." South Dream had been confident that he could negotiate with Zero Wing's guild leader as an equal before he had met him, but now his confidence was gone. Even the 4th branch's vice guild leader would have to treat a Tier 3 powerhouse with respect at this stage of the game. If they provoked such a player, and that powerhouse decided to disregard the consequences of causing trouble, their guild would suffer for it. "Dark Pursuit's 4th branch?" Nodding, Shifeng asked calmly, "How do you wish to collaborate with Zero Wing?" Super guilds were massive organizations. Thus, they divided their territories among their branch guilds. When another power wished to ally with a super guild, they do so through a branch guild. Powers rarely allied with a super guild as a whole. Dark Pursuit had 5 main branches, and as far as Shifeng knew, the 4th branch controlled a considerable amount of the guild's alchemical resources, including many of the Moon God's realm's specialty materials for potions. During his previous life, the 4th branch had played a huge role in Dark Pursuit's success with occupying the market in many of the main continent's kingdoms and empires. "Truthfully, we are here to request that Zero Wing allow Silent Wonder to join Dark Pursuit," Cold Memory said, gritting her teeth. "I know the proposal is a little offensive, but you might not realize her true identity and the responsibility she holds, Guild Leader Black Flame. If she remains in Zero Wing, she will only bring ruin upon herself. She can only resolve the issue she faces by joining our guild. Of course, our 4th branch will do everything within our authority to supply Zero Wing with various resources in exchange. With these resources, Zero Wing will be able to develop further. I hope that you will do what's best for Silent Wonder's future." The Foundation's Zero Wing had displayed thus far had greatly surprised Cold Memory. She was especially shocked by Shifeng's status as a Tier 3 player. However, after all was said and done, Shifeng was only one player. Meanwhile, a single individual couldn't free Silent Wonder from her predicament. She'd only be able to resolve her problem by joining a super guild like Dark Pursuit. "Memory." Silent Wonder snapped, annoyed and hinting that Cold Memory should stop speaking. It was her business after all, and she owed Zero Wing a massive debt of gratitude. During her membership, the guild had offered unusually loose restrictions and gave her everything she needed to improve her alchemy standards quickly. Now that Zero Wing needed her strength, she couldn't just abandon the guild for her own interests. Although if she didn't leave, her presence would put Zero Wing in considerable danger. Lately, she had been frustrated and hesitant due to this dilemma. "Wonder, you know that you don't have much time left. Yin Zioyan isn't the only one with the full support of a superpower. Do you think you'd defeat your competition without any help?" Cold Memory asked. Silent Wonder fell silent. She didn't have anything she could say to that. If it were a simple competition of alchemy techniques, she was confident of emerging victorious, but it was a different story when the competition involved combat power and foundations. "Wonder's identity? What do you mean?" Shifeng asked, confused. He thought he was relatively familiar with Silent Wonder's story. She had been one of the 10 great Grandmaster alchemists during his previous life and a lone ranger the various superpowers had desperately tried to recruit. However, he hadn't heard anything regarding a powerful background or special identity outside of her Grandmaster rank. "You've heard of the Azure Chamber of Commerce, correct?" Cold Memory asked. Shifeng nodded. Very few people in the virtual gaming world hadn't heard of the Azure Chamber of Commerce. Although it couldn't compare to the Secret Chamber of Commerce, it was one of the top 10 chambers in the virtual gaming world. It had far more resources and wealth than any ordinary superpower. However, even during Shifeng's previous life, the Azure Chamber of Commerce's focus had been on the Western continent. It had rarely bothered with anything on the Eastern continent. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Wonder is the heiress to one of the two families that control the Azure Chamber of Commerce. To earn the right to rule Azure, the family's heirs periodically compete. Only, none of the heirs are allowed to use Azure's strength. There are only a few days left before the next competition, and Yan Xiaoqian, one of Wonder's competitors, has joined Dark Pursuit and receives the guild's full support, Cold Memory truthfully explained. Smiling, she continued, "Now, guild leader Black Flame, do you still think it's best that Wonder remains in Zero Wing?" The Azure Chamber of Commerce's overall strength rivaled super guilds. Hence, the two main shareholders of Azure fought desperately to secure the right to rule the organization. If Silent Wonder lost, Yan Xiaoqing and the others, her competitors, would definitely try to squash Zero Wing to prevent Silent Wonder from becoming a problem in the future. Similarly, Silent Wonder's family would hold Zero Wing responsible. The guild would be the cause of their loss in such a vital competition after all. Silent Wonder's family wouldn't stop until they vented their anger out on Zero Wing. As for winning the competition with Zero Wing's support, that was impossible. Yan Xiaoqing had the full support of a super guild. The best solution was for Silent Wonder to join Dark Pursuit as well. This way she could compete with Yan Xiaoqing on equal terms, and Dark Pursuit wouldn't try to interfere with Silent Wonder's development. If other powers attempted to interfere, Dark Pursuit would ensure that they bit off more than they could chew. Chapter 2354, Mental Strengthening, What Memory Says is True, Guild Leader Black Flame. South Dream added, afraid that Shifeng would misunderstand their intentions. God's domain is becoming more popular across the globe. More corporations have been investing in the game as well, and as a result, Azure's two main shareholders have become desperate to win the organization's right to rule. Azure might focus its development on the Western continent, but it still had a lot of influence among the Eastern continent's empires. If either of the shareholders decide to target Zero Wing, your guild's development will suffer. Zero Wing might be very powerful, but it wasn't a superpower like the Azure Chamber of Commerce. This was especially true now that the Western and Eastern continents had more contact. Many superpowers were trying to join Azure. If Azure asked those superpowers to move against Zero Wing as a condition for joining, many of them would be more than willing to fulfill that request. At that time, Zero Wing's position would become very precarious. If Zero Wing did not wish to suffer, it had to allow Silent Wonder to leave. Not only would she have more access to resources, but Yan Xiaoqian wouldn't be able to monopolize Dark Pursuit's strength either. As for Zero Wing, it would avoid Azure's wrath and receive help from Dark Pursuit. Silent Wonder gave Shifeng an apologetic look. She knew how crazy her family was about this competition. If the two families hadn't kept such a close eye on each other, they would have likely resorted to underhanded means to win the upcoming competition. She also knew that if her family lost, they'd go ballistic. They would absolutely vent their anger out on Zero Wing. Meanwhile, Zero Wing wasn't in the best of positions at the moment. If more superpowers tried to interfere, the guild's days would be numbered. Thank you for informing me of the situation. If there is nothing else you'd wish to discuss, I'll consider our meeting over now. I still have other matters I need to attend to, Shifeng calmly replied. What are you trying to say, Guild Leader Black Flame? Cold Memory stared at the swordsman, confused. For a moment, she even wondered if Shifeng knew anything about the Azure Chamber of Commerce or Dark Pursuit. If he made the wrong decision now, Zero Wing would encounter enough trouble to ensure the guild's destruction. I'm already aware of Wonder's situation. If another guild can support her, so can Zero Wing, Shifeng said, chuckling as he replied to Cold Memory. Shifeng was far more familiar with the Azure Chamber of Commerce's strength than Cold Memory. It was one of the top 10 chambers of commerce in the virtual gaming world, after all. It was as powerful as super guilds. Ordinary superpowers simply couldn't compare. Needless to say, Shifeng knew about Dark Pursuit as well. Not only was Dark Pursuit a veteran super guild, but it had also annihilated two superpowers after the planar passage's activation during his previous life. If Zero Wing had encountered this situation some weeks ago, he would have seriously considered the matter. However, that was unnecessary now. Guild Leader. Silent Wonder was incredibly touched by Shifeng's statement. She became even more resolved to remain in Zero Wing. Insane. This guy must be insane. Does he really think he can help Silent Wonder with Zero Wings resources? The response rendered Cold Memory speechless. Azure's internal competition wasn't just a competition of alchemy standards. It was also a competition of strength. Zero Wings resources couldn't even compare to an ordinary superpowers, much less Dark Pursuits. Memory, I've decided. I want to stay in Zero Wing. Even if Yan Xiaoqian has Dark Pursuits full support with the research workshop, my defeat isn't guaranteed, Silent Wonder decided, turning to look Cold Memory in the eyes. Suit yourself. I don't care anymore. You better not regret this later. Cold Memory exclaimed, annoyed. She had never thought Silent Wonder would be confident of defeating Yan Xiaoqian. Yan Xiaoqian had access to the intermediate meditation room every day and was only one step away from becoming an advanced master alchemist. Dark Pursuit planned to invest all of its available resources in her training to secure its first advanced master alchemist as well. On the other hand, Zero Wing's only advantage was its research workshop. The workshop might help Silent Wonder become an advanced master alchemist, but she wasn't likely to complete her promotion before the internal competition. The research workshop only provided hints. Players still had to research their designs or recipes and materials and experiment. It wasn't possible to reach advanced master rank quickly, and this wasn't just a competition involving alchemy standards. Had Silent Wonder joined Dark Pursuit, she would have, more or less, had a chance at victory, but since she had decided to remain in Zero Wing, she had practically no hope. Cold Memory and South Dream then left the reception room. For Zero Wing's arrogance and Silent Wonder's blind faith, she could already predict the outcome that awaited them. Memory, are you really done caring about this? South Dream asked. I don't have anything else that could persuade Wonder. Our only other choice is to recruit Moon Silk for Dark Pursuit. I didn't want to approach her, but her strength is unquestionable. If Moon Silk wins, Silent Wonder can maintain her position in the family for the most part, Cold Memory said as she shook her head in frustration. The competition between the two main families involved more than 2 people. 6 people would take part in total, 3 from each family. As long as one of the participants earned first place, the other 2 family members' performance wouldn't matter. The winner's family will still secure the right to rule the organization. Moon Silk was the most talented among the 3 participants from Silent Wonder's family. However, she was also the most quirky of the 3. Cold Memory had hoped to avoid approaching the woman. However, as things were now, they didn't have a choice if they wanted to help Silent Wonder's family win the competition. Moon Silk. Even South Dream shuddered at the mention of her name. However, after giving the matter some thought, he agreed with his companion. At least, this option would increase their chances of victory. If Moon Silk won the competition, Silent Wonder's family wouldn't restrict her freedom over much. Following which, Cold Memory and South Dream quickly left White River City and made their way to the city Moon Silk resided in. Meanwhile, back in Candlelight's top-floor reception room, Shifeng pulled an ancient, sealed parchment from his bag once his guests had left. I'll leave this with you for now. I hope it will help you become an advanced master alchemist as quickly as possible. If you succeed, you'll have a much greater chance of winning your family's competition, Shifeng said as he carefully removed the seal and handed it to Silent Wonder. As Silent Wonder inspected the parchment, her eyes went wide in shock. Guild leader, how did you get this recipe? Silent Wonder's breathing grew somewhat labored as she stared at the recipe in her hands. What she held was no ordinary recipe. It was a peak master recipe for the Droplet of Life potion. Countless alchemists dreamed of getting their hands on this parchment to study and learn from it. The reason for this was because of the Water of Life. With the Water of Life, one could resurrect the dead. The potion contained an unimaginable amount of life force and served as one of the base materials to resurrect NPCs. Unfortunately, the Water of Life was too precious and more valuable than what money could buy. The Droplet of Life potion was a weakened version of the Water of Life. Although it couldn't resurrect NPCs, it could help NPCs recover from severe and permanent injuries. It was easy to imagine how valuable this recipe was. Most importantly, no one had even found an advanced master recipe yet, much less a peak master recipe. Alchemists that wanted to rise through the ranks needed to create new recipes, but to create a recipe suitable for their rank, they needed a lot of reference material. Without that, they wouldn't know where to start, which was why master recipes were so valuable in God's domain. However, at Silent Wonder's standard, basic master recipes, were no longer useful. She'd need advanced master recipes. Unfortunately, she had never managed to locate an alchemical master recipe, and as a result, she had been forced to explore and experiment by herself. The Droplet of Life recipe would definitely help her reach the Advanced Master Alchemist rank. Rather than answer Silent Wonder's question, Shifeng asked, "Now that you have this recipe, how confident are you in completing your promotion?" The Droplet of Life recipe was incomparably precious and one of the most important recipes the Sunset King had dropped. It was only inferior to Grandmaster recipes. Shifeng had planned to offer it as a benefit for the guild's core members, allowing Candlelight's Master Alchemists time to study it. However, to help Silent Wonder reach Advanced Master rank as soon as possible, he decided to postpone those plans. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. I'm afraid that I'm only 30% confident of reaching my promotion before the competition, Silent Wonder said helplessly after a moment of self-reflection. Becoming an Advanced Master Alchemist wasn't easy, and even with the research workshop's assistance, she'd still need time to conduct her own research. 30%? After pondering for some time, Shifeng said, "It's a little off, but it should be enough." After saying so, Shifeng called up the Candlelight Trading Fin system interface and chose to upgrade the shop in Blue Bay City to 3-star status. At the same time, he established a shared warehouse and sent the members there to transfer the Primal Void Stones. The various major powers would likely assume the best use of the Primal Void Stones was selling them to the Dark Forces for gold and resources, but they weren't aware of the stone's other function: mental strengthening. Chapter 2355 Advanced Mana Set Equipment, 30% is enough? Silent Wonder was confused by Shifeng's statement. Based on his tone, he seemed very confident in her success in becoming an Advanced Master Alchemist. Not only did she need enough proficiency points for her promotion, but she also had to create a new Advanced Master recipe. Unfortunately, creating an Advanced Master recipe was multiple times more difficult than creating a basic Master recipe. It wasn't simply a problem of mixing materials. The process also required magic arrays, which tested her ability to manipulate mana. Resources and hints weren't enough for her to reach the Advanced Master Alchemist rank. "I can't guarantee it, but if you have a 30% chance, we should be able to boost that to 80% within the remaining time," Shifeng said, chuckling. 80%? Silent Wonder repeated in a higher-pitched tone, giving Shifeng an incredulous look. Creating an Advanced Master Alchemist was easier said than done. Even if the various superpowers alchemists generously offered her all of their research, she'd be lucky to increase her success rate by 10%. Yet, Shifeng insisted that he could help raise her success rate by a whopping 50%. If God's Domain's various master alchemists heard this, they'd laugh at Shifeng for being an ignorant fool and a layman. However, Shifeng was no noob when it came to lifestyle classes. He was a bona fide intermediate master forger after all, an existence that stood at the apex of God's Domain's forging industry. He was also one of the first players to become a master lifestyle player in God's Domain. There were less than a handful of people who could claim they understood lifestyle classes better than Shifeng in the Candlelight Trading firm. You'll understand when the time comes. For now, head to the research workshop and study the Droplet of Life recipe. If you can master that recipe, it'll definitely help you to create an Advanced Master recipe, Shifeng said, ending the conversation rather than elaborate. The secret regarding the Primal Void Stone was too important. If information about the stones leaked, it would cause a huge commotion in God's Domain. The Advanced Master rank was a huge threshold for lifestyle players. Over 90% of the Master lifestyle players in Shifeng's previous life had been stuck at Intermediate Master rank due to the difficulty of the promotion. Those Masters hadn't lacked techniques, but simply hadn't had the mental strength to succeed. Rising through the tiers was the easiest way for players to improve their mental fortitude. The higher a player's tier was, the stronger their mental strength would be, which was also why most of the top-tier lifestyle players of Shifeng's previous life had been high-tiered players as well. Silent Wonder was only a level 97, tier 2 player. She'd still need quite some time to reach level 100, not to mention complete her tier 3 promotion quest. Meanwhile, God's Domain had very few items that could improve a player's mental strength, and the Primal Void Stones were one of them. However, mainstream players in the past had only learned this secret after reaching level 160. When they had discovered it, the various superpowers had fought desperately to secure Primal Void Stones. From then on, Primal Void Stones hadn't been treated as a simple mana-gathering tool. They had become a strategic item to improve combat and lifestyle players' standards. Although the Primal Void Stones only improved a player's mental fortitude by 20% to 30%, it was a valuable boost. Players only received a slightly higher percentage when they reached a higher tier after all. If Silent Wonder didn't have any issues with her alchemy techniques, she should have no problems reaching Advanced Master rank as long as she had adequate mental strength. After sending Silent Wonder to the research workshop to study the Droplet of Life recipe and while he waited for the Primal Void Stones to become available in the shared warehouse, Shifeng began to select a few of Candlelight's other shops to promote to 3-star status. With White River City's Candlelight trading firm now a 4-star shop, he could upgrade 5 2-star shops to 3-star status, and after promoting Blue Bay City's shop, he had 4 slots remaining. After much consideration he chose the shops in Dark Knight City, Black Dragon City, Apocalypse City and Twin Tower City. With 3-star shops in these cities, recruiting lifestyle players and collecting materials would be a lot more convenient. With 5 more 3-star shops, it wouldn't be long before Zero Wing's lifestyle operations would rival that of the various superpowers. Once it did, the Candlelight Chamber of Commerce would be strong enough to rival the superpowers' chambers. Zero Wing would no longer need to rely on Stone Forest City's temporary residences as bait to lure guilds into joining the Candlelight Chamber of Commerce. However, to give the Candlelight Chamber of Commerce a competitive edge and earn a fortune from it, it would need more than a lot of lifestyle players. Candlelight would also need a large variety of valuable, useful products. It seems it's time to research these forging designs, Shifeng thought as he glanced at the ancient, sealed parchments in his bag. Aside from weapons and materials, the Sunset King had dropped 14 designs and recipes, and every one of them was master rank. The most valuable of them was the Droplet of Life recipe, but following that were the 6 forging designs for an advanced mana set equipment. The Crimson Sunset. The Crimson Sunset set was only a Tier 2 advanced mana set equipment and couldn't compare to level 100 plus Dark Gold set equipment, but it was still far stronger than what current players had access to. As an advanced mana set equipment, players could also rely on the equipment up to level 120. Its basic attribute bonuses were just as significant as that of level 100 plus Fine Gold set equipment, and it would be more than enough for Tier 3 players to rely on until they reached Tier 4 at level 120. Shifeng then left the reception room and found an empty basic meditation room to start the Crimson Sunset's production. Initially he had wanted to give the designs to Melancholic Smile and the others, but since they were still busy with the Crimson Dragon flying ship's parts, they didn't have the spare time to forge the advanced mana set equipment. Moreover, unlike other master forgers, Shifeng no longer needed to create a new forging design to become an advanced master forger. He needed forging proficiency. Fortunately, crafting set equipment was the fastest way to earn proficiency points, especially if one crafted mana set equipment. Sure enough, a mana set equipment's production process is really complex. It's no wonder why only a few superpowers had managed to produce their own mana set equipment in the past. After reading through the Crimson Sunset design, Shifeng took in a deep breath. The Crimson Sunset was several times more complex than a pre-level 100 Dark Gold set equipment. The forging techniques were particularly demanding. Shifeng could only think of 3 master forgers in Candlelight that could handle the techniques. Most importantly, players would need incredible mastery of magic arrays. One would, at the very least, need to be an advanced magician even to attempt drawing the necessary magic arrays. No other master forger in the trading firm was capable of drawing the Crimson Sunset's arrays. Even Shifeng had to spend 5 hours to learn them. Now that I've grasped the basics, it's time to start the actual production. However, the material cost is vicious. Any other guild would likely despair at the very idea of paying these costs. Shifeng revealed a bitter smile as he examined the required materials for the mana set equipment. The Crimson Sunset's main materials were mana stones and magic crystals. A single production attempt would cost 40 mana stones. If Shifeng hadn't been able to rely on the Philosopher's Stone, he'd only be limited to a few attempts. Even so, producing the Crimson Sunset would still cost him a lot of magic crystals. He was relieved that the guild had found a manatite vein. Otherwise this design would simply be too expensive to use. Once Shifeng verified that he had everything he needed, he began to forge the mana set equipment. He would have to forge the Crimson Sunset's 6 parts simultaneously. It was so demanding on a player's mental strength that even if a weaker player learned the process, they wouldn't be able to use it. Fortunately, Shifeng's mental fortitude was already relatively high, and after his promotion to Tier 3, it had become even stronger. During his first attempt, his magic array's quality hadn't been high enough, and the process had failed before he had finished half of it. On his second attempt, due to physical imperfections, the system deemed his product a total failure. The results of his third attempt were nothing but scrap metal as well. In the end, Shifeng had failed 6 times in a row, losing enough materials to make his heart ache. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. You please let me succeed this time. Shifeng prayed as he gritted his teeth. Nervously, Shifeng appraised the crimson sunset before him. If this attempt failed as well, he'd have to give up on the set. As Shifeng clicked the appraise button, the 6 pieces of crimson equipment on the stone table lit with a dazzling, colorful glow. At the same time, the room's mana flooded to the equipment pieces. System: Crimson Sunset has been successfully forged. Forging proficiency increased by 180 points. Obtained 1,200,000 EXP. System: Black Steel Insignia's effect triggered. Crimson Sunset's attributes increased. Chapter 2356, Primal Void Stone Room. The crimson sunset radiated such a colorful glow that it illuminated the entire meditation room. Its aura was just as intense as that of Great Lord-ranked monsters. The strengthening effect improved it so drastically? Shifeng read the crimson sunset statistics in shock. He was already overjoyed that he had successfully produced the advanced mana set equipment. He hadn't actually expected to trigger the Black Steel Insignia's effect as well. Now, the Crimson Sunset's basic attributes could practically rival a Tier 3 mana set equipment. Mana equipment wasn't like ordinary equipment. It traded durability, which would continue to deplete with each use, in exchange for greater performance. Because of this, players could exhibit extraordinary strength with mana equipment. If a level 100 Tier 2 Expert wore Tier 2 Advanced Mana Set equipment, they could solo a level 100 High Lord. Normally, a Tier 2 Expert couldn't even solo a level 100 Lord and would need a full party to take one down. This was why Shifeng was so determined to produce the Crimson Sunset. Zero Wing already had an adequate number of peak combatants, but when it came to lower-grade experts, the guild was no match for the various superpowers. If he could arm Zero Wing's core experts with the Crimson Sunset, their combat power would undergo a qualitative transformation, and they'd only be weaker than true Tier 3 experts. Now that he had the experience of producing the Crimson Sunset, Shifeng began to mass-produce the mana set equipment. His production success rate was still quite low, but one Crimson Sunset would instantly arm Zero Wing with a Tier 2 expert that had the combat power to rival peak experts. Not even the various superpowers were capable of accomplishing this feat. Furthermore, the Crimson Sunset would be immensely helpful to players when they challenged their Tier 3 promotion quests. Following which, Shifeng forged 22 Crimson Sunsets, only stopping when he received a message from Melancholic Smile. She had contacted him to inform him that the second batch of Primal Void Stones had been retrieved from the shared warehouse. Blue Bay City's members had also added the third batch to the shared warehouse. They're finally here. After reading Melancholic Smile's message, Shifeng decided to take a break from the Crimson Sunset's production for now. It took 24 hours to transfer items through the shared warehouse. Although the shared warehouse could only hold 200 Primal Void Stones at a time, it was the most convenient method for transferring non-bag space items that Zero Wing had right now. If he had to rely on the Crimson Dragon flying ship, it would take more than 24 hours to receive a shipment from Blue Bay City. With 2 transfer cycles, White River City's Candlelight Trading Firm had 400 Primal Void Stones in stock. Although 400 Primal Void Stones were far from enough to construct a building, they'd be more than enough to build a small room. A small room might not be useful for combat players, but it would be for lifestyle players. They didn't need a lot of workspace after all. Shifeng then contacted Melancholic Smile and had her deliver the Primal Void Stones to one of the small reception rooms on the top floor, and he began to modify the room. Shops in NPC cities had fixed layouts for their workshops, and players weren't allowed to modify them, but the reception rooms and offices were a different story. Since these rooms didn't have a specific function, players could modify them as they wished. To protect the Primal Void Stone's secret, Shifeng saw to the modifications himself. Fortunately, one didn't need to be an architect to complete the task. Finally, after more than a dozen hours of work, Shifeng had replaced the walls, ceiling and floor with Primal Void Stones, spending 376 stones in total. If Sindhart saw the room, he'd have a heart attack. If they had sold those stones, they would have earned nearly 20,000 gold. Even the various superpowers would find a 20,000 gold modification to a small reception room to be a stroke of madness. And yet, Shi Feng wasn't satisfied. He also set up a mana-gathering magic array within the room, increasing the room's mana density even further. Combined with the Primal Void Stone's mana-gathering properties, the mana in the small reception room was only slightly less dense than in the research workshop. These Primal Void Stones are amazing. This is only a small room, yet it can improve a player's mental strength by 20%. If I construct an entire building, I can likely increase that boost to 30%, Shi Feng thought as he sensed the improvement to his mental fortitude. If he could train in such an environment, he might even be able to execute a perfect lightning flash, even if he were still at Tier 2. The Primal Void Stones were far more effective than he had expected. Tools that could improve a player's mental strength by 10% in God's domain already sold for astronomical amounts of money. One might not even be able to exchange a fragmented legendary item for such a tool. However, a Primal Void Stone room could improve a player's mental strength by 20%. Shi Feng finally realized why the various superpowers in the past had reserved their Primal Void Stone houses for their own use, refusing to rent them to outsiders. Once he was satisfied, Shi Feng contacted Silent Wonder and requested her presence. Silent Wonder had a huge headache from trying to create her new potion, having reached a bottleneck. She wanted nothing more than to spend the 48-hour day in the research workshop, but upon receiving Shi Feng's order, she had no choice but to set aside her research and begrudgingly visit the small reception room in question. Guild leader, this room? After a moment in the small reception room, she was stunned by the sensation of it. Silent Wonder hadn't felt anything in particular when she had first entered the room. She had merely felt a refreshing coolness spread throughout her body, but after 5 seconds she noticed that her mind was far clearer than before. In addition, her physical control and mana had increased substantially. It's not bad, right? Shi Feng asked, chuckling at Silent Wonder's shocked expression. The research workshop can only provide a rough guideline. You'll have to figure out the details on your own. Meanwhile, this room will help improve your control. You can spend time here to learn the techniques and concepts you've struggled with. With this environment, your chances of creating a new recipe should rise to 70% or 80%, right? The room is simply magical. Forget 80%. I'm sure I can create a new recipe if I work in here for the next 4 or 5 days. Silent Wonder excitedly and confidently exclaimed. While in this room, she could finally understand some of the aspects of the Droplet of Life recipe that had confused her. Moreover, the advanced magic array she had struggled with no longer seemed difficult. She was 90% sure that she could draw the necessary arrays to produce the Droplet of Life now. Good then. I'll have Melancholic send some alchemy tools up in a moment. If you come across anything you can't figure out in the research workshop, you can come here to figure it out, Shi Feng said, not surprised in the least by Silent Wonder's declaration. A room of Primal Void Stones would even be useful to Grandmaster Lifestyle players, not to mention Master Lifestyle players. With Silent Wonder's talents, it'd be a joke if she couldn't become an advanced Master Alchemist with the help of this room. Once she had everything she needed, Shi Feng stopped bothering Silent Wonder and returned to his own basic meditation room to continue his work with the Crimson Sunset Mana Set equipment. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. With access to the Primal Void Stone rooms, Silent Wonder completed her promotion to Advanced Master rank in 4 days, becoming the first Advanced Master Lifestyle player in the Candlelight Trading Firm. Meanwhile, Shi Feng worked arduously for 5 straight days, leveling up from 103 to 104. His leveling speed was absurdly fast for someone of his level. He had also produced 86 Crimson Sunsets, although he had blown through all of Zero Wing's stockpiled magic crystals. While he'd been busy, Fire Dance, Gentle Snow, Violet Cloud, and Aqua Rose had returned from the Tower of 4 Gods, all 4 now at level 100. Shi Feng instructed the 4 women to learn a bronze combat technique using the Ocean Barrier Stones before he sent them off to challenge their Tier 3 promotion quests. Guild leader, Azure's people have arrived. They say they're here to take me to the competition venue. Silent Wonder suddenly contacted Shi Feng to inform him. They're here? Shi Feng set his tools down. Nodding, he continued, I'll go with you. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.